most people just judge you on your appearance alone and say this is an evil person.
They have this preconception kind of shaped by Hollywood.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, whatever you believe in, I'm not telling you to let that go. You came here to master your body. Why would you be in a body that you have no mastery over?
All right, I am here today with Melissa Paone Somma, who is someone I've known for a really long time. You are known as the Chakra Witch.
That's me.
You also own Light Club Curiosity Shops. You have two of them actually, Sugarloaf in Warwick, New York.
Correct.
Right, so you have two of them. And I've known you for many years, and I find you to be one of the most interesting and thought-provoking people that I've ever met, and I mean that.
Thank you.
You have so many amazing attributes and have accomplished so many things. And we have a lot to discuss, but first I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me today, to be here. Taking time to indulge our curiosity.
Thank you so much. I really was very honored when you asked me because I hold you in very high regard. I mean, I try to only deal with people who hold a certain level of integrity, and you are our soul crystal provider, really.
Yeah, the fun thing about this and when I started doing this is, there's got to be a reason behind everything.
Yes.
And, as my platform grew and grew and grew, in the beginning of growing my media and my platform for that, always had a very specific goals in mind for that. And as I started achieving those goals and surpassing those goals, I started to realize, I don't want to turn this into a numbers game.
Yes.
Because now I'm just playing the game that everybody else is playing, and I started to realize that I was losing a little bit of that authenticity.
Yes.
And this is bringing me back to that place where everything is about information, diving into the information, figuring out what makes sense. Just because we don't have the same viewpoints, everyone has a different viewpoint in life. But for me, I was like, how do I get my hands on people who actually have levels of comprehension around what they're doing, who are not afraid to do legwork and research and all of these things, because now the people who are leading the charge on a media front really...
I just think what happens is as you grow in whatever area you're working on, you start moving up the ladder and you start working into these different circles. So each circle has its own challenge. So the more followers or the more attention you're getting or the more connections you're making, now you're faced with other challenges, and it's usually, as you get higher and higher, it's more and more about the integrity, because you can get addicted to this certain level and you look at everybody around and you're thinking, I have to do that in order to stay here. And it's actually the complete opposite. You have to do something different, otherwise you're not contributing to that new level. So if you're not authentic, you're not going to stay there. You're not going to have any staying power. There's a lot of fads out there. There are a lot of things that people come up with, and that idea will explode for a little while and it'll go viral, and then they can't duplicate it because they're not being their authentic self when they're presenting it. They're just kind of trying to appeal. They're doing what they think will get them more, as opposed to what got them there in the first place was them being real.
Yeah.
So, you have to find your own way, really.
Yeah, I think in touch to what you're saying there is that, keeping yourself in tune and aligned with what you're supposed to be doing why you're doing what you're doing in the first place is, again, just to kind of give you a little bit of background here as to why we're sitting here having this conversation. And then, obviously in the beginning I was like, let me find and contact people, which actually you were here not that long ago anyway, 2 months ago.
That's right, about 2 months ago.
There's a couple of people that I've had friendships with to some degree over the years, and I was like, let me start there with people who are close, as opposed to trying to go chase after influencers and famous this or whatever it is, because you know what, I don't know if you've noticed or how in tune you are with it, but it's the same people.
It is.
It's the same 10 people just interviewing each other. At the spectrum of podcasting and media, it's really like the same group. And they're just ping-ponging each other back and forth, and it's become quite redundant for me. And I think that the idea here that you need to be like famous or influential in this degree does not provide us with any kind of, perspective. No. That's not perspective. You're in that position.
Yes, exactly. I mean, because, a lot of it has to do with, they're looking outside of themselves. So they're looking to get their validation from what other people are saying or what they're presenting. They're looking to get that validation from outside. So that's why I just keep going back to they're trying to appeal by following a formula that they think is going to work. And that's why it's the same thing back and forth, because it's the same formula. Instead of being grounded in what can I bring to this? Because in the beginning, when all of this started, it was more innovative. In the very beginning, because they were trying to figure out what worked. So you were actually presenting something that you believed in. Then it happened to go viral, and then they would do the same thing again because they're trying to duplicate that first success. And it never quite makes it there because it's no longer innovative. It's redundant.
Well, let me get into my line of questioning now.
Yeah, go for it.
So one of the coolest things about you is that you are a 5-time world champion martial artist. And I'm wondering what drew you to that pursuit and what was its effect on your life?
Okay. This is such the effect on my life is really, I cannot be grateful enough for having gotten into it because it wasn't my idea. I was about 11 years old, okay, and this is back in 1983, so yes, I just dated myself, but that's okay, all right, there weren't a lot of women and there weren't a lot of children, all right, this is pre-Karate Kid. There really wasn't much of this mainstream as it is now, okay, and my mother felt that it would be a very good idea because I was very much in my own head, very, very introverted. And I come from a very extroverted family. So I was the strange bird. They didn't really know how to deal with that. So my mother convinced me to try it for a year just to see if this would be something that would be beneficial. And I realized that just upon the first lesson, it was just something that clicked. Sometimes you just step into something and you belong there.
Was it Taekwondo or?
Tang Sudo. So it's Taekwondo, but it also has some of the Chinese influence. So it's almost like if you took Taekwondo and you mixed it with Kung Fu. Very, very similar. And it's actually being popularized right now in Cobra Kai. They're actually they mention it. And I was very, very surprised because I usually don't see my style mentioned very much. I mean, there are some prominent people. Chuck Norris is Tang Sudo. But otherwise you don't really see it that much because it's considered much more of an art. It's not as mainstream. Taekwondo is in the Olympics. It's considered to be the national sport of Korea in some circles. But Tang Sudo is very much, it's an art. And it should be focused on, looked at in that way. My instructor was the son-in-law of the founder of the style, the recognized founder of the style. So it was very, very traditional, very, very strict. But something in me really liked the structure. And that's one thing that has paid off in dividends when it comes to just really developing your spirituality. If you don't have structure, you don't have anything to build off of. It's a house of sand. And I learned how to meditate. And on a daily basis, I was doing this. I was learning how to kind of integrate, read the signals of my body, get awareness. So all of these tools were being introduced right at that ripe age of 11. It's a master year. It's the first of the master years, 11, 22, 33. So right at 11, I'm getting all of these skills. And also skills that weren't really that accessible to females. And in a very male-dominated field, it was something that's yet another skill. Because if you can really make an impact in something where the odds are really stacked against you, then everything else just becomes that much easier. So that's why to this day, I relate everything to that martial arts experience because that gave me confidence, that gave me presence. That's exactly what my mother was hoping I would get. And it was indirect because she just realized when she saw what it was, she goes, well, this isn't what I thought it was. I don't know if you can do this, which was interesting because she trying to give me confidence, at one point she just kind of stepped back, and I don't know if this is the right thing, but I was already rolling with it.
Yeah, I think that someone who meets you for the first time, if you said, tell me 1,000 things about this person, I don't think 5-time world champion in martial arts is going to be one of the things they come up with. Just, again, not to, what's the word? I'm not trying to like paint a picture around anything, but like that's not a narrative that would be organically, you'd have to tell me that narrative. So I think it's, the reason I asked you that first is because I think it's something that's just like so amazing. And again, going back to your childhood, and I know it's kind of one of those things that shaped you and developed you and pushed you in that direction, but the pursuit of after winning the first championship there and then going 2, 3, 4, 5, was there at that point, was there a pursuit of something? Was there a goal in mind, or you were just kind of riding the wave there? And then what finished? Well, where did you decide to no longer, because you're not teaching that?
That's right. Yeah, that's actually very, there's a very important reason why I started and why I stopped.
Right.
And it really has everything to do with why I practice what I practice. Now, the reason I started, it was actually an accident. I had a student who wanted to compete on, the national level, actually the world level. She started out national. And she had come to me from another school. And it was very much a competition type of school. I was just very, very traditional, I didn't even know about these type of competitions. I just knew that if you train the right way, you get results. That was it. And I didn't really care about any of that. So this father had brought his daughter, and she had just made the Junior Olympics for Taekwondo and all of these other things. But they had some issues at the school with the instructors. And I think they were just pushing her. And she just got to the point where she didn't really care about competition anymore. So her father just brought her to me. Can you give her back the love of it?
Yeah.
Now, I loved competition, which is surprising because I was so introverted, but it was really the type of thing where I liked preparing for something. I liked having a goal. I didn't care how I did, because it was just getting myself ready for the competition, because I was always at my best when I was preparing for something. That was the main reason for it. But when I started training her for these competitions, the father would watch, because it was one of his real stage dads, and he would say, yeah, well, you're telling her that, but in this type of competition, they do it differently. And I kept going, I don't care how they do it, this is the right way to do it, okay? You don't do it for the win. You do it because it's the right way to do it. And eventually that does pay off. And the daughter had no problem. She was loving the way I was showing her. And he kept saying, you don't really understand. So I finally looked at him. I said, look, man. And I said it to him just like this. I said, I could walk into one of these national tournaments and I'm guaranteed I will place in the top 3 if I do if I do it absolutely the right way it's supposed to be done. So I walked into a huge tournament. It was the Junri Internationals in Washington, D.C. And as she entered, I entered the women's division, which was one of the largest women's divisions I'd ever seen. And I went first out of a pool of 50 women.
Can you specify in what was the competition actually? Was it sparring?
It was, forms, kata.
Okay.
Technique. I didn't do sparring at that level only because the amount of training that I would have to do, it would take me away from the teaching. So my main focus was the teaching. So I went first, and when you go first out of a pool of 50 people, you know how they score, right? So the scores get higher as you go along, and all the seeded players go at the end, meaning they've been competing, they're ranked, so they get the best placements at the end.
Yes.
All right, so I went first because I was an unknown. And out of 50 people, I walked out of there with second place. I held on to the lead until the absolute last woman went. And I walked out of there with a second place medal, and I remember her father's jaw, he was just he couldn't believe it. And I said, see, there you go. And I had never meant to compete again, but the problem was, well, it wasn't really a problem, but the challenge was that now I had accumulated a ranking. So by the end of the year, I got an invitation to the World Games. because of that ranking. Well, what happened is, so did this student, and I wanted to go to coach her, and I realized that like if I did a competition, it was cheaper than buying a coach's pass. Okay, so the cheap in me said, well, if I compete, I get on the floor and I can still coach her for a third of the price. So I decided to compete at the World Games, and that's how I got into it. I never intended to do it. And
this was all for kata?
This was all for kata, yes. Okay, which very challenging because, you know, you've got those 5 judges there, and they were not familiar with my style.
Yeah.
So they didn't know what I was doing. So in the beginning, I would get people coming in and protesting, you're doing something that's Japanese style, you can't do that in the Korean division, and then I'd have to sit there and I'd have to explain to them.
Yeah.
So I'd have to defend my position, but in the same token, that was actually very good for me because I work very good when you throw a challenge down, obviously, because that's how he got me into World Games. You know, I would have never gone, but he told me I couldn't do it. He told me I didn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
That's how I do it. I tend to work very well with a challenge because that's really the way martial arts are. They present you with a challenge, and then you take your ability and you bust right through.
Moving on to now the more obvious aspect of things. So something I didn't know about you until researching for this podcast was that you are the high priestess of the Sacred Order of Light.
Yes.
Is that a group, an organization, and what does it teach?
Okay, that is a group that is actually considered, it's kind of our nonprofit organization, and it's considered to be a coven. Okay, but it's more like a covenant. It's a for lack of a better term, I wouldn't call it a church, but it's really just more of a fellowship.
It's a coven.
Yeah, it's a coven.
Yeah.
It's a coven. It's just that not everybody understands when you're talking about a coven.
Yeah, insert definition of coven.
Right. So basically, when it comes to our shop, we have a separate school. Okay, and we have different levels that we teach. So there's a level 1 that we call the Path of the Witch. Level 2 is the Path of the Mystic, and level 3 is the Path of the Priest or the Priestess. And it's basically a goal to just kind of go through and become ordained in this organization. And we just teach the craft of the wise. So, but because it is a Sacred Order of Light, it's more of an eclectic type of thing where I take everything that I've learned and I put it in. A lot of people think that, oh, it's Wicca. It's not. Okay, it's actually several things that are kind of grouped together, and it also encourages the person to follow their own path and bring what they know and what they believe into it as well. So it ends up being something where you learn how to shape your own spirituality.
But what does it mean to be the high priestess there? Did you start it?
I started it. I am the teacher. Okay, so right now I have over 120 students that are enrolled. I'm about to ordain about 18 more priests and priestesses.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's pretty much where we get together. You know, we do our moon rituals together. We have study groups together. And it's just, it's a monthly meeting, but we tend to meet more than that. And it's more building a spiritual community. And it's open to all. And it's just, what happens is about once a year, I open it up for the new students to come in, and that usually happens right around the beginning of November.
Right.
And everybody can enroll, and I have online, both online and in person, so I didn't even count the online. About 120, I'd say in person, but then there's another 20 to 30 online.
So speaking of coven, and you're bringing the word witch into this whole now, you describe yourself as an eclectic witch.
Yes.
Can you describe that, and what does it mean to you to be a witch?
Okay. Well, witch translates to mean wise one. So it's pretty much the whole concept of being a witch. And I think people have this idea in their head already. They have this preconception, which unfortunately is kind of shaped by Hollywood. I hate to say it.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, pretty much. And really, a wise one, that's somebody who is just developing their own way, developing their own form of spirituality. So instead of following, you have to kind of carve your own path. You have to figure out what resonates with you. So whenever somebody starts in as, just studying with us, starts in as a witch, I just tell them, I'm not taking anything away. I'm only adding on to. So whatever you believe in, I'm not telling you to let that go. That's what got you here. So I'm going to just add on to it and give you more tools for your toolbox, your spiritual toolbox. So as a witch, it's basically somebody who steps up and takes control of their own spirituality. Okay, now there's this little acronym that goes out there that witch is woman in control. Basically woman in control of her own spirituality. It stands, I believe it is woman in touch and control of herself.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But not just women. Men are witches.
But I just want you to touch on the eclectic witch part, because that's how as I understand it, that's how you're describing it. Is that just a term, or does it mean something specific?
Oh, it means something specific. Because with eclectic, you are umbrellaing a lot of different systems, and you're not just cleaving to one path. For example, with Wicca, there's a very specific way of doing things. It's very structured. And because I come from a structured background and a disciplined background, at one point, you learn structure so you can have freedom from it. Like learning how to play scales in order to be able to play music. At one point, you step out of the structure. So with an eclectic form of witchcraft, we start out with the structure, but then after that, you can carve your own way. So I'm not asking you to let go of anything that you brought into it. So if you have a very strong belief system in another area, you can hold on to that and just add on to enhance your own spiritual toolbox.
Yeah.
So with eclectic, you have freedom within structure. And I just feel that for me and for the people that I tend to work with, that tends to be the best way for us.
So essentially, I have a very similar standpoint, which is that I don't want to box myself into anything.
Exactly.
Because I think that there's value in all of it. Information, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Information has value. And so I think that for me personally, the need to box myself into a community that is very specific to one kind of narrative, especially a narrative that is not one that was critically thought by the individual themselves.
Exactly.
Which I think is the problematic part, where it's like most people, the largest percentage of people are looking for a narrative that somebody else came up with, because they are not in the headspace yet to make their own conclusions, and their certainty in themselves is not strong, so they need to pursue the certainty and the narrative of somebody else who potentially knows more than they do. So I like your narrative here, which is what you're saying, I'm in the sandbox, and all of the toys in the sandbox are open to play with.
Absolutely. Plus, the whole idea with spirituality is it's to make ourselves the best version of ourselves. So I don't want you to be the best version of what I believe in.
Yeah. You've
got to be the best version of what you believe in and what works for you. And especially when it comes to, when you start practicing the craft and everything, of course there is this part of it that is spell work. I want it to work for you. I'm not going to teach you. Sometimes if something works for me, doesn't mean it's going to work for you. All right. Now, I could give you a great foundation to build off of, but from there, we want it to work.
Yeah. And I think that's something, like, people come to me all the time and ask me about spiritual properties to stones. People have a lot, I'm so hesitant to give out any kind of information in that direction, because for me, this is a personal the way that I got to understand the narratives that I understand is not by someone telling me those narratives, but it's by cultivating my own understanding and my own beliefs, because then it's a real thing, not just something that I'm relaying. And so I really like the fact that you're also incorporating, and I just want to really quickly hit also that, again, with my knowledge of you as a person, and I think people's basic fundamental understanding behind what a witch is, and we're going to get more into that as we go, but I think right now I just want to set that baseline standard that you, from my personal experience, in no which way, shape, or form are a malicious person, a bad person, nothing like that. But I think that most people, especially in some of the world religions, are going to look at you and just judge you on your appearance alone and say this is an evil person.
Well, that happens all the time.
Right. But that is not the case.
No.
Right.
No, it does happen often.
Yes, and again, I wanted to make that statement saying from knowing you,
yes,
that is not the case.
No.
At all. Otherwise, I wouldn't have.
Right.
You're one of the 5 or 6 people that I personally know that I actually invited to come and have these conversations with me not because of lack of value, but because of value.
Right.
So moving along, you also refer to yourself as a practical magician.
Yes.
What does that entail?
Well, with a practical magician, that's really more about, I would actually kind of encompass that more as law of attraction. Okay, that's really what fuels it, is learning how to be responsible and manifest things. So, for example, if I decide that I need a bigger space, okay, which this has happened several times. You know, over the course of me coming here, and actually both of us, every time I come back, I have a new place or you have a new place. So it's kind of nice to watch that ping pong back and forth there. But the whole thing is that with a practical magician, that's somebody who's just consistently, and this goes back to my martial arts training, consistently setting a goal to propel me forward. So I'm always looking to, okay, well, now I want to start doing this. Now I want to have a space to have my school. Now I want to have a space to have production. I would like to be able to produce all of the things that we make for our shop within the shop and educate people as to why we make it the way we do. So it's pretty much about being able to constantly set a goal and accomplish it. So
does your term magician come from tarot? Like, is it related?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because I think that what most people's interpretation of that is that you're going to do a magic trick.
No. Right. Magician is all about manifestation.
Right. So,
and that's the magician in tarot.
Right.
It's actually, I always say that my husband is a magician because he's just so into manifesting constantly. And we do this all the time. We actually send each other like goals, pictures back and forth of ideas. And then they're going to unfold. Because as soon as one of us gets the idea, especially if both of us decide that we're working towards something, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And that's the whole idea with a practical magician, is basically put your magic where your mouth is. The second you start saying that you're going to do something, you better follow through. And all of your actions.
Practically speaking.
Practical.
Right.
Yeah, so don't say it unless you're about to show it.
Right.
That's the idea.
I love that. You specialize in something called self-mastery. Can you elaborate on that?
Again, everything always comes, that's why it was so good that you started with the martial arts question, because that was really a very big part of it, learning how to control yourself. Because if you had control over yourself, then there really wasn't any challenge that could come at you that was going to throw you off. Because the hardest person in the world to control is yourself. And if you can maintain control over yourself, you don't have to worry about anybody else. You really don't. Because all they're doing is presenting challenges for you to master within yourself. So everything, whenever we're looking at that, it's actually a tagline on my shop, is teaching the magic of self-mastery. Because that's really what it is. No matter what direction you're coming from with any type of spirituality, it should be focused around self-mastery, finding the spirit within. And if it's not going for that, I don't need you to find my self-mastery, I need you to find yours. And so it's pretty much putting out there that I will help guide you towards your level of self-mastery. And also my husband is always telling me, be the master, show people that you are the master a lot of times, because I did achieve that in martial arts. So often when I doubt myself, he's got to remind me, remember who you are, be the master.
Right. The word spiritual has become something that is just so rinse and repeat at this point. It's also a trending thing. It's a fashionable thing. Right. But what does it mean? Like, when people are saying I'm a spiritual person, what is that supposed to actually mean?
Connected. Okay, alignment. Right. So when I say spiritual, I'm going directly with how I relate it to, say, the crown chakra. Okay, because again, Chakra Witch, everything is chakras. And that is the point where you connect to everything around you and you realize you have influence. So when you're talking about spirituality, that is where you recognize your responsibility in this world and your influence over it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is. So it's your level of magnetism. Okay, your level of being able to influence somebody, you're able to make things happen, your ability to master the physical world, bringing your spirit in, bringing your energy in to be able to accomplish a life worth living.
I think that it's one of those things that really needs to be addressed in the degree that it's something we all should be striving towards as a group, not just as an individual. And when you hear the word spiritual brought up, typically it's associated with an individual process.
Right.
Which, that's fine, but now we're talking about a belief system.
Right.
Spiritualism, for me personally, is lifestyle.
It is.
It is that moment where when you're taking on that challenge of self-mastery, which
Correct.
is a great term for that, because self-mastery for me, as you were saying that, and I'm trying not to inject myself too much here into the narrative, but I remember one of the most difficult things when I was starting into my process of becoming a spiritual person, one of the most difficult things to do was to become celibate,
yes.
which I know is kind of like a racy subject to some degree, but that was one of the hardest things. Maybe that was the hardest thing for me to actually climb.
I went through a period of that as well. I did. And I think at one point, there's all these different levels of mastering yourself. That's why I kind of like to move it through the chakras, is that then there's the physical level, then there is the sacral chakra, which is the sensuality and everything. You've got to master that level. Then the solar plexus, you have to master self-confidence, self-esteem, willpower, action, stepping forward, presenting yourself. Then there's the heart chakra, which is empathy, healing, and connection. The throat chakra, speaking your truth, integrity, following through with what you say. The third eye, then there's that mastery, trusting your vision and trusting your vision enough to know that it is a contribution to the world. And then finally, the crown chakra, where bringing all of that out in its purest sense to have a positive impact on the collective.
Yeah, becoming like a teacher.
Correct. Yeah, everybody is a teacher. Yeah. That's why self-mastery, everybody
right.
is the master.
But you shouldn't be teaching per se until you've reached
so
that.
You move through.
Right.
You have to move all the way through, because it all comes back to responsibility.
Correct.
It's responsibility. And I think when people throw out spirituality, you have to be careful, because there's a lot of ego in that. Like saying that I'm spiritual.
I'm great.
So
I'm
I
good.
do it this way, and so I'm okay. I don't need to do all of these things.
Yeah.
No, everybody has to find that. Everybody has to follow through with that. And there is really no shortcut. So I will get people who will come to me and they'll think, oh, witch. Okay, I'll learn how to be a witch and I'll cast a spell and I can get whatever I want. Nuh-uh. Okay, you have to create enough energy. You have to raise that energy. You have to go through all of those channels to create enough of a level of magnetism and influence to make these things happen. And there is no shortcut. And if you don't face yourself, you do not understand anyone else.
Yeah.
You don't. Because I'm looking at myself right now, as you are looking at yourself. And if you don't get that, you don't understand spirituality.
Yeah. And again, I just want to touch just one more time on this idea of the self-mastery, because when I was going through all of everything I could find, that was the thing I think that popped out to me the most. That for me, I was like, what is that really like? Because again, I'm asking myself these questions too. I'm not just coming in blind and saying to you, what are these things? I also asked myself, really resonated with me that terminology. And it brought me, as I was sitting there coming up with this, it brought me to that place where I remembered that break through the wall moment when I was like going through the restriction of my sexuality.
Yes.
It is a level of self-mastery, because it is a physical attribute that we have that is based off of a lustful desire.
Absolutely.
Which draws us to the physical body and keeps us there in a lower vibrational state.
Correct.
So it's not about like you're wrong or you're a sinner or you're a bad person for engaging in, whatever, promiscuity. The thing is that, how much willpower do you actually have over yourself and your bodily desires?
Right. Yes.
And so for me, that was it. But I remember, I brought to my attention the breakthrough moment for me there, where I remember I didn't sleep all night. I didn't sleep all night, and it was like as if there was a demon inside of me, screaming for me to do. You know, it was its last ditch effort.
Yes, right before you break through, that's when your biggest challenge comes. Right before the breakthrough, and it's so important because. And I've faced it in a lot of different ways. I've tried to, just trying to get mastery over your body, trying to get mastery over your impulses, trying to get mastery over your drives. I've also really paid attention to diet, because if you can't control what you're eating,
right,
that's another one. That's usually the first one, because that is one that's just, it's very difficult. You get those urges. It's the same type of thing. So it's all in that root chakra type of thing where those basic drives of food, sex, and everything, you got to build up through there. Now, what's very interesting is that men, when they have sex, they have it from the root chakra. But women, it's up in the womb chakra. It's up in the sacral chakra. So it's a little different. It's much more emotional. So when, I went through that period, I actually ended up trying to tap into the chakra and say, okay, what are the different ways in which I can access this energy in a much more constructive way instead of a destructive way?
Right.
And that's when I became very, very creative. And I learned how to tap into the energies. I started writing. I started putting a lot of things out there. I became very, very productive. And what was good is once I got the mastery over that, I could break the celibacy at one point, which it was a while though. It was quite a long period. But when I did that, I was able to do that and still access all of that creativity. See what I mean?
Yeah.
But sometimes you can't tap into it until you pay I don't want to say pay the price, but until you basically give yourself that level of mastery. You don't get the key to the next level. See? So I feel like that period of celibacy was my key to learning how to burst into that creativity. So now with males, it's the root. So that's your level of life force and basically your magnetism. Okay? So you're going to probably get that almost euphoric feeling when you break through it. And you feel like almost like superhuman.
I don't think that it's a common thing that's achieved by a large percentage of men.
No.
It's a very, very hard one to achieve. And if you're going to be really honest with yourself and not just pretending on the outside. But I remember that battle, like I was saying, that I had where it literally felt like a demon.
A demon, yeah. It's like almost like
I remember sitting on the corner of the bed. And I mean, it was not that big of a deal, but it was. I was going crazy, and I was remember literally like grabbing my hair. It was really crazy. I mean, again, if this is now going into like maybe like a 5-6 month period of hitting the brakes on myself and restricting myself, and it peaked at that 6 month period. But after that, after the next morning when I woke up,
you were fine because
5 years.
It's like boom,
5 years of it of complete celibacy, no masturbation, 5 years
7
straight, and it was only that first 6 month run that was the issue. But once
and once you get that, it's you broke an addiction, and I always say that people who are able to break through an addiction, have truly faced their own demons, and these people, it's rare because all of us have an addiction to something, everybody does, but not all of us face that.
Yeah.
That is true self-mastery. And until you get to that level, you haven't really tapped into your spirituality, because that's the key. That's the key to the next level. And then you work up to the next one. Now all of a sudden, boom, that throws you upwards and outwards, and now your energy starts to expand. And you can also help guide other people to facing their own demons as well, because you have truly faced yours.
Yeah, and just to kind of like the word demon there, I'm not saying it as if like there's some like biblical demon. It's literally something that you create. It's an addiction that you create, an addiction to a desire.
Correct.
A low vibrational desire.
Right.
And essentially for me, why I was using the word demon is because when I was doing things like that, especially controlling my language, controlling what I was eating, all of these restrictions on physical pleasure, you're essentially starving a demon.
Correct.
And as the demon gets hungrier and hungrier and hungrier, it causes much more chaos in the process until the place where you just starve it to death, and then
it's done.
Calm seas after that.
There you go.
Yeah, and it really is just like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
On your website, you state that you offer a service called Divine Guidance.
Yes.
Can you describe that service?
That's actually something, and it's funny, it kind of goes back to the self-mastery. That's something that, term was given to me. I was just sitting there, like when I was getting ready to put everything on the website, and I just said, I finally just sat back and I said, I don't know how to describe what it is I'm doing because I'm not really seeing it anywhere, so how do I say this? And it just basically came through. I basically asked to hear it, and it just said, wellness, witchcraft, and the magic of self-mastery. It just gave me that tagline.
Yeah.
And I remembered, I was in the car, and I said it to my husband. I was like, I have it, I have the line. And we were on vacation somewhere. We weren't even talking about that. I just threw it out in the middle of nowhere. But divine guidance, that's pretty much what I'm constantly asking for that guidance. And I realized that people would come into the shop, they would ask questions, or they would want a reading with me, and then we'd sit down, and I'd say, okay, well, what do you want to know? And they said, I have no idea. I just know that I need help. I feel like I've lost my way. So what I'll just sit there and I'll get them talking, and I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to link into you. It's just something I just try to do, like, empathically, okay? And then I'll just sit there and I'll just start to channel, this is what you're facing right now, this is what you need, and I just start laying it out. And often I might be throwing cards at the same time, and I'll say something, and then I throw down a card, and the card mimics what I've already said. It's interesting. It's almost like done it's a type of a trance. I've done it with you, okay? So it's more the type of thing where divine guidance is the point where you surrender, okay? Because at one point we all have to do that. You surrender, and you just pull through your higher self, and you get back on track.
You know, I don't have this on my list of questions, but I mean, endlessly do we hear this higher self narrative.
Right.
Can we get some like clarity around what this is? Because everyone's throwing that term
higher
around.
Self, yeah.
What is this higher self we're talking about?
Well, with higher self, you've got to remember that you are an individual, but you're also part of the collective. So when you talk about the higher self is the part of you that is the collective, okay? So that's the part that has access to all. And so there's this, it's almost like if you've ever done those little paper dolls that you pull apart, they're all string, but you can crush them all together and it's all one, but then when you start to string it out, you have many. So they're all connected. So it's one, but it's many at the same time. So when you're talking about the higher self, you're just recognizing that you have access to all this other information because you're connected to everything. So higher self, it's just a way of us saying, because people get a little afraid of losing their own self, losing their individual.
Okay.
So when you get too much into spirituality and you realize you are connected with anything, it can become easy to lose yourself. So you just realize, no, at all times, even in this little meat suit you're walking around in, you have this connection to all. And that's the higher self, is basically that part of you, that voice inside. That's the way you interpret the collective. That's the little voice that's almost like this little ambassador over your head that just says, okay, well, this is how you're going to bring the information into this particular incarnation of yourself. This is how the meat suit is going to interpret this information.
The meat suit.
Yeah, the meat suit. That's what I call it. That's what it is. Okay, so you
sounds like it's like a term out of like Hellraiser, though.
Yeah, so you're given your little meat suit. You're not given any way in how to navigate the world. You don't have this little owner's manual.
No.
But you have this conscience, okay, which is kind of like the little go-between between the meat suit and the collective, and that's your higher self. So that's basically your little owner's manual up there that we kind of forget to listen to when we get too immersed in, meat suit pursuits.
I like the owner's manual concept there. I think that kind of practically simplifies it to some degree, which is getting access to that owner's manual. Because there is no instruction manual.
No, and that's why
not from the parents, not from anything, not for you. It's just it's kind of a wing it situation, and I think that this idea that you've been kind of cultivating up to this point is really leading us in this direction, for me anyway, where I'm coming to this understanding that a very similar narrative to what I already kind of believed myself.
Yes.
Which is that, you know, the real goals here are not in and around your belief system. It's in and around you and your relationship with yourself.
Exactly.
And how are you going to conduct yourself, and how are you going to push your boundaries? How are you going to set standards, morals, ethics, and how are you able to meet those things? Are you able to be consistent and disciplined in all of those things? And, you know, interestingly enough, why I started with the martial arts is because I also have a martial arts background.
Nice.
You didn't know that? I never told you that?
I did not know that.
I have 3 black belts. I was also a national champion,
Nice.
Taekwondo national champion
There you
3
go.
years in a row, state champion 7 years in a row. So I'm familiar with all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually there's a picture of me when I was 6, 7 years old over there in the hallway.
You better show
when
me
I
that.
won my first state championship.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know what that also did for me, and the regimen of that, and it creates this early discipline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I started
that.
when I was 3 or 4.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I was already, you started at 11?
11, yeah.
Right, but I think that for me, that's a more practical time to start.
11, yeah.
Is around that age range where when you're so young, like you're really not, you're just showing,
Right.
they're just throwing you in the class and you're like doing stuff,
But you are getting the discipline of your body.
Right.
There's still merit in it. I mean, I had a tendency, I found like the sweet spot was right around 8 years old.
Yeah.
That was the perfect, because then they started understanding the structure. They started
Right.
understanding the discipline. Pardon me.
Yeah, no, I was teaching I was teaching classes by the time I was 10.
Oh yeah, yeah. My first class I taught, I remember. I remember.
Well, not that I
this.
was the teacher, by the
Yeah.
way. Just the teacher would be like, "Okay, you teach the class while I
That's exactly
go into
what-
my office and blow coke."
It always is. It always is, because that's the point where you start to learn and you start to get that little point of disillusionment that the people that you're looking up to aren't necessarily upholding the values that you got into it for. And that's when you find out, okay, wow, there is no owner's manual. There is nobody that I can follow.
Right.
And you have to go through that, because otherwise you would just follow this person forever. You have to see that point where, okay, this person took me to this level, but now how do I get to the next one? But when
You have to be brave enough to believe in your own narrative over
Correct.
the narrative of everyone else.
you have to, yeah. And the whole thing is that you're given a structure, okay, and you get this thing, but then you have to take it. You're constantly growing and you're constantly developing, and everybody's growing in a different direction. So you're never going to stay in one direction for too long. If you do, you're going to stagnate. So that's why spirituality, I always say that it's a big responsibility. You have to be developing and taking yourself to the next level. So you're a teacher, but you're also a student. And that was one thing that I got. I remember when I was getting ready to test for my black belt, and I went to my instructor and I wanted help. And at that time, female, they don't really, it's just kind of like you got sloughed off to the side. The one thing I'm very happy about is it's not the case anymore. So in my lifetime, I got to see this way of thinking become outdated. But it was basically, oh, you want help? Well, go over and you're going to teach this children's class. And the way they justified it is they said, if you really want to know something, you better be able to teach it. So I went in, and I remember getting this children's class, and trying to get control of them was very, very difficult. And I was just getting this kid and this kid. It's like herding kittens. And then finally, I stepped out of the room and I said, I just have to go in there and be the boss. That's the only way they're going to listen to me. I don't have to worry about this kid, whether or not this kid is paying attention. You just have to go in there, and you can't be concerned with them. You just have to present yourself the right way and take control of the situation. So if I take control myself, they'll fall in line, because at least I'm focused. They're not. And a focused person is always going to be more influential than an unfocused person. And I was really lucky that I figured that out at 14. And I went in there, and the first thing I did is I had them start running some laps and everything. And I stood in the middle and I started telling them, this is exactly what we're going to do. And I said, when I clap my hands, you're all going to stop and we're going to start moving. And for some reason, it felt so right. And it kind of came through, like, this is what you're supposed to do. So at 14, I knew I was going to be teaching for the rest of my life, just in that moment.
going into the term manifestation, because you use that frequently. You like that word manifestation and to manifest. And it seems like, this story you're telling me right now is largely around you manifesting your own inner strength and your leadership qualities at this point in particular time. But more importantly is, what does it mean for you when you say manifest?
Okay. That's the whole reason we're here. That's what this world is. This is a world of manifestation. So that's when I'm talking about like the owner's manual. We have come here to learn how to master the physical plane. And that's what the key to it is, our bodies. Because if you cannot master your own body, you cannot master anything else on the physical plane, because your body is the key. That's why it's so important to have spiritual, mental, physical discipline. That's why it's crucial. So anything that you're doing in this world is a manifestation. It is, because it's something in the physical world. So a manifestation is just creating basically a charged current of intention in the physical world. Really. So everything is a manifestation. If I want to manifest a certain thought or a certain answer or anything like that, that's what you're doing. So you've come here to master the physical plane, and you're given this meat suit, which is the key to doing it. Because if you can do it in your body, you can influence anybody else, because everybody else is just a manifestation of you.
Yeah.
Because you're part of everything. You're part of the collective. You get it in your body, you get it everywhere. And that's pretty much it, really.
The one thing I would like to add, maybe you can kind of adjust me to some degree here when it comes to that, is, I've had several people who are, intuitives or whatever it is, use the term master manifester in my direction once or twice. I've heard that.
I've heard that a lot. It's very popular lately.
Yeah. And the thing is that whenever someone brings that up is because they saw me create something out of nothing in a very short period of time.
Right.
And what you don't see is that it's not about creating something out of nothing in a short period of time. It's about getting yourself to that place where you've earned what's coming down the pipeline. And what's behind the process of all that wasn't seen. Again, like one of the things that I would say is that often when I have new employees or something like that, I will tell them, okay, start sending out emails to all of these people, right? Send out emails. And I already know that the result of that sending out those emails is nil.
Exactly.
But because of the effort behind that and your desire to achieve something, something just shows up at the door randomly, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you put it out there. So I saw this, and maybe it was a meme, and I usually don't like to bring these up, but it said, overnight success takes about 15 years. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. What looks like an overnight success took about 15 years of work to get up to that level of magnetism, to be that influential.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I'd like to point out something very specific. A specific moment that I remember was I have another warehouse in Arizona in Tucson.
Yes.
We were out there, and every trip that I make out to Arizona, which is a quarterly trip, there's a goal,
right?
A monetary goal that has to be hit in order for the trip to make sense.
Correct.
Right. So if the trip cost me $50,000, I have to make $100,000 in order to put $7,000-8,000 in my pocket. Anyway, we're out there, and it was a really bad trip. The trip was going very poorly, and I said out loud, I was out there with 4 or 5 of my employees at that time, and I said out loud, I need to make a $25,000 sale right now. And I swear to you, within half an hour, this guy came in and spent exactly $25,000, and all of my employees at that time saw it, witnessed it happen. And I wasn't even the one. They called up and were like, "Hey, are you anybody at the warehouse right now over there?" And they just came in, $25,000 purchase, boom, done. And then I was able to write. The thing is that everyone who was in the room, all the employees, they looked at that situation and were like, you could see their minds exploding from that. And what I explained to them, I said, this wasn't magical, by the way.
Right.
This isn't mystical thing that happened here. This is all of the legwork that I did.
Correct.
All of the things coming that now is when I asked for it. is now what shows up. So it's one of those things that's very hard to explain to people, but just because you don't see results from your efforts in one direction doesn't mean that you're not going to see the result in a completely different direction that just shows up on your doorstep. It's happened to me throughout the 15 years of my business experience.
Well, plus you don't do something like some type of practice to get this result, like to be able to make X amount of money. That's not the reason you do it. You do it because it's the owner's manual. I just keep going back to that term, the owner's manual. It's just like, you came here to master your body. You came here to be able to do these things. Okay, so why would you be in a body that you have no mastery over? You're just walking around with something that's not under your control. You should be able to control when you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed. You should be able to control your, what you eat, what you sustain your body with. You should be able to control your urges. And if you can't, what are you doing? Okay, and then what will happen is it will make your path of influence much more productive. It'll make it much more with ease. You'll be able to do what you want to do because you understand Earth rules. You understand the rules of the plane that you're living on. You understand it, and that's why you do it. You don't do it to get something, but getting something can be, a benefit from it.
Again, this term of manifestation, I also associate directly with something called merit.
Right.
So the two of those things are synonymous for me personally. I'm going to make a hard left real quick because, again, as I was going through your media, I noticed that you recently were celebrating something called Lamas.
Yes.
Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And I read your description, that you had quite a lengthy description around it, and I found it to be super interesting. And I thought it would be really interesting for you to elaborate on what that was, what it is, and kind of summarize this, because I thought it was very interesting and intriguing.
Okay. All right. Well, a big part of our practice is following what we call the wheel of the year. So it's the cycle of the seasons. So we tend to cut...
When you say we, you're referring to...
Sacred Order of Light, our practice, but also, it's a very common practice in witchcraft as well, where you are pretty much kind of following the turn of the seasons, and you're letting the way the earth works around you influence your practice.
Would you say it's a Wiccan holiday?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Okay.
Yes. And when you are working with the wheel of the year, the wheel of the year starts at around what they call Samhain, which we tend to know as Halloween. Okay, that is actually what is the witch's New Year. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where everything resets.
I think it's close to Rosh Hashanah.
Correct.
Which is close to the Jewish New Year.
Exactly.
I don't know if the two line up with each other.
Sometimes, but pretty much what happens there is that's the end of the final harvest, and then everything starts to cycle from the beginning again. So it's almost like that's the point where you're finally done with all the seeds that you've planted in the harvest, and everything's finally done, and now you're ready to start all over again. So you go into that period of winter, and then it reboots into spring, resurrection, and then summer is production, and then of course harvest, like that. So it follows that, and we tend to follow that energetically because, again, that's an earth rule.
Yeah.
So as you get into the harvest time, such as Lammas, which is the first harvest, okay, that's the beginning of, it's usually the first crops that come, and it's stuff that usually grows straight because that grows the fastest, like wheat, corn, things like that. So it's usually, they call it the Festival of Bread, which for me is like, that's just wonderful because, I love me some bread.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that being the first harvest, that's the beginning of shifting into that period of the year that is based on prosperity, harvesting things, seeds that you have planted coming to fruition. Okay, so we look at that. It's usually a time of offering gratitude because you're starting to see the fruits of your labor.
Yeah.
But it's also a time where you're very much based on, this is time for action, this is time for movement, this is time to get things done and get everything in alignment and preparing for the new cycle that's eventually going to come at the end. So it's a powerful time, and it's a big shift of energy. A lot of people don't realize this, that they're usually focused on, say, the solstices and the equinoxes, which are important shifts, but this one is the beginning of the earth really stepping into production. And also, it's right around the time that you're going to really start to see it getting darker earlier, Like this, I believe that this is the last sunset today that is before 8 o'clock at night.
You know,
So.
Why I brought this up and what I thought was really interesting is, again, your description in the post that I read is different than the one you just gave me a little bit, which I thank you for keeping it PG, this description.
Yes.
But, something that as I was reading that, what kind of jumped into my head for whatever reason was the parable about the mustard seed.
Yes.
That Christ gives. And,
yes.
Again, to touch on more of the actual narrative that I read and understood from your post was that, you need to enter into this time and this cycle where there is darkness, where there is death, where there is suffering to some degree.
Absolutely.
And not that we're celebrating that holiday for those purposes.
There is the beginning of that, though. You have to recognize that.
Yeah. And the thing is that as human beings, that is part of our process. It always has been, and God willing, that changes.
Oh yeah.
But the point that I got out of that was that by celebrating that, it really takes away the edge of it and it's so terrible, and it allows you to actually paint this picture where it's all part of the process, just like the harvest, just like the planting of the seed and the growth, and then the harvest, and then the fall comes, and all the leaves die. Right? I mean, there's this cycle going on, and all of that cycle is necessary. And for you to be upset at part of the cycle and happy with the other, it doesn't actually create circuitry. And this is what I got from your post.
No, you're correct. I mean, that goes back to the whole sacrifice thing. Okay, there's that big part of there has to be a sacrifice. There has to be really more of a surrender whenever it's your spirituality. So what happens with lamas is there's actually this one practice that they call, they actually personify, they call it John Barleycorn. And they say that that's the spirit of the harvest, that's the spirit of the wheat. And he is sacrificed. He cuts down in order to feed the many. So you have to cut away that one part of yourself that is not productive in order to make it productive for all. You have to cut away at those parts of yourself that do not take root.
Yeah.
So, and also when you're getting closer to what we call the dark half of the year, because that Samhain is actually what splits it in half. So we have the light half of the year where everything is lighter and producing and growth and all of this plenty. But then we go into the dark half of the year where it's based more on its introspection and facing yourself and getting rid of that which you have outgrown in order to bring in the new. So it's like a forest fire. You have to burn away the old in order for new growth to appear. And that is a big part of recognizing that, knowing that, okay, well, you're going to have this harvest here, but at the same time, you have to let go of certain things that are no longer where you're at. You have to let go of these old habits, these old beliefs, these old things, these old prejudices in your mind, these things that hold you back and get in your way.
So, the world's most practice. Let me start it over again. The world's that's really. I'm still in the thought-provoking perspective of that whole concept because again, it's a new one for me.
Yeah.
And it was also a new avenue and a new arena to be like, I can see the practicality, and I love how you use the word practical magic.
Yeah.
Because when I read that term and I processed that term, I understood actually what that meant.
Great.
And it made a lot of sense to me because, again, hey, I need a $25,000 sale to show up, boom, it shows up.
There
Everyone's like, that's magic. But it's not.
It's not.
Because you don't see the practicality behind it.
Right.
And I love your terminology. I don't know if you were coming up with these terms or where they're coming from, but I love your terminology, and I think that it really resonates and makes sense for someone who's an open-minded person. And I think that a really weird thing for me to stop on is this Lammas holiday situation.
Not really, because it's important at this time of the year. It's a big energetic shift. And Lammas is actually, they consider that to be, it's called a Sabbat. Okay, that's just, those are those big holidays, those markers. So when you have the Wheel of the Year, it actually works. It's almost like, I always have this saying that I say when it comes to spirituality, it's all about the food. Okay, so it's like Wheel of the Year is almost like slicing a pizza. Okay, you cut it in half. light half of the year, dark half of the year.
Yeah.
Now you cut it across, okay? When you cut it across, now you've got 4 sections. Once you cut it across, that line there's one feast called Imbolc. Okay, 6 months from them is Lammas. At Imbolc, that's actually the time, it's almost like the pilot light of the earth comes back on. The animals start to produce the milk, and even though it's in the beginning of February, okay, where you're not seeing the spring yet, everything starts to shift into that direction. That's why you have, 6 more weeks of winter, or, that whole thing. It's kind of shifting into that type of energy. So they say that that's when you're supposed to really start to plant the seeds for what your year is going to be. That would be the time when you do your real New Year's resolutions, because you've worked through your stuff during that dark half of the year, that introspection, you've faced your demons, and now you have a clearer perspective on what you want to do. So 6 months from that is Lammas, where you start to see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. And even though it's the beginning of August, people don't think there's anything behind that time of the year. It's a huge energetic shift.
Yeah. And I think, again, this was my first introduction to this, and I never knew about this.
Yeah.
And, again, learned something new, and also connected to the narrative around it as well.
Yeah.
Because the narrative around it is not what you would expect, because if I'm being completely honest, when you come across things like this, especially for someone like myself, or someone who's a little bit more moderate in their understanding of this narrative, you might be like, oh my God, this is kind of weird, crazy, or whatever it is. But actually, it was refreshing to see the practicality around it, and how it actually was relatable and made sense, and wasn't this like weird, witchy kind of thing that you would imagine it to be.
Yeah, I'm a very firm believer, if you can't connect to it, why are you doing it? You have to have some reason there. See, and then that's why when you break it down, people start to understand. They're like, okay, well, that makes sense. And you're just doing what the earth is doing. So you are finally back in rhythm with your environment. Again, learning earth rules. You don't go against the current around you. Okay, you do what the earth is doing, because you are the earth and the earth is you. So you have to tap into that flow, right? And if you're not following earth rules, you better start, go back to the manual, and that's that little higher self over the head. You didn't
Again,
listen.
Speaking of grain and wheat and stuff, going against the grain.
Going against the grain, literally going against the grain. That's the perfect way of saying it. Yeah, and then those 2 final cuts, going back to that pizza again, would be the equinoxes. Okay, fall equinox, spring equinox, and then solstices. Okay, summer and winter solstice. And those are your 8 observations of all of those markers. Each one has a different energy. You're focusing on a different aspect of your life.
The world's most practiced religion currently is Christianity. And it's apparent in viewing your social media that you have an attraction. But for me, when I was writing this up, the word that came to me is romance.
Yes.
And
that's a good word.
It seems like you have this almost like a romance with the church, which is interesting, because I have exactly the same. There's a romance there. That's how I know that word, because I have, and actually, to be very specific about it, you had a picture of a tiny little white church.
Yes.
And I said, you know what? Me personally, if I saw that, I would be attracted to that. It's same, but for whatever reasons, I don't know anything about, but I would be attracted in there because of the romance. Absolutely. And I was hoping you could kind of expound upon that and what attracts you to that. And I don't want to shoot myself in the foot yet, but what is that relationship, and where does that stem from?
Well, very strict Roman Catholic background, first off. Okay, and I went to Catholic school. But I actually asked to go to Catholic school. My parents didn't put me in. I begged to go to Catholic school. This is a very unusual thing.
Well, that's where we differ.
Yeah.
I wanted out.
I actually asked. I was only in for about, for a few years. Then I just kind of matriculated into regular middle school and everything. But I was always fascinated with religion, with the church. I just found the practices to be beautiful. And I think I realized what it is I love ritual. That's what it is. It's the ritual of everything. And Catholicism in particular, very, very structured, very ritualistic. And that's a big part of our practice now is, when we practice the Sabbat, there is a ritual behind it. But it's that ceremony of kind of creating that sacred space for yourself. Mm-hmm. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
But there is also that part of where it's so beautiful and it honors spirituality to such an extent. And that's not the key to it. Like, you don't have to go to that church in order to find spirituality, but it makes it very easy. Very, very easy, because it's just celebrated there. Like, this is a place where you can go, you can pray, and you can have that sacred space.
Yeah.
And it's just that, and a lot of energy is concentrated towards that goal. So every time we go somewhere, go on vacation or something, that's one of the main things is we go to find a church or a cathedral of any kind. It doesn't necessarily have to be Catholic, but temples, just absolute fascination and love for that physical representation of ritual and spirituality.
Yeah, and I really do connect with that narrative myself, because I also went to Roman Catholic school, elementary school, and I have this romance with the church. And again, it has nothing to do with the beliefs of the church.
No.
It has nothing to do with anything it has to do with my own personal romance with it.
Yes. And
one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that for me, and it's interesting you brought up temple and all of these other things, because I've been to really, really big churches, mm-hmm. I've been to cathedrals, I've been to the Vatican, I've been to all of these places, but I can tell you that there are certain pockets where you can feel something special and deep, like a well. That's the word.
A well.
Yes, that's
Absolutely.
the word.
Yeah.
That it's almost a well there. Mm-hmm. And when I saw your picture of this white church,
mm-hmm.
That gave me that.
Did you see that? Yeah.
That gave me that feeling just from the picture, never mind even being there, just from the picture. And I was like, oh, me and her are on the same page here with this, because that picture told me that we were all on the same page, which is interesting that just from a picture I was able to deduce that.
Yeah. I have a tendency, like when we go on vacation somewhere, I'll look up, cathedral, things like that. And I knew before we were going there that it was considered, it's the smallest church in Canada, obviously. Mm-hmm. Tiny little church.
Yeah.
And I said, I gotta go there, we gotta go there. And I had no idea how we were gonna find the place. And ironically, as we were driving in towards our hotel, we're just looking, there's all these little fields and farm markets and vineyards and everything, and beautiful. And I think we were maybe 2 minutes away from the hotel. I look over, there's the little church, right there. And it's just so funny. It always tends to happen just that way, that wherever I want to go, it just appears.
Yeah.
And it's just a concentration of, it didn't need to be there. It's not like there's this big congregation coming there. Here's just a nice little place that was built just for the love of worship, of communion with spirit.
Yeah, because that's essentially what that's the correct way to really word that and explain that, is that it doesn't matter what the establishment is, it doesn't matter what the institution actually is. What matters is what's going on in somebody's heart, and because that resonates through the vibration of something, and then that stays.
Yes.
And that's what I meant by the well.
Yes. Yes. And just that sweet little devotion, like what it took to just build that little church, just for no reason, no goal. They're not going to get anything back from it. Just that fact that they just believed in that, and they wanted that to be there, and they wanted that space for other people to have it too.
Various world religions seem to abhor paganism. Mm-hmm. Yet we see so many similarities between those world religions and paganism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're based on. That's why our religions are based off of paganism. Paganism is pretty much, it's kind of an umbrella term for following, just following the earth. See, it's an earth-based type of worship,
right,
as opposed to a heaven-based type of worship. Okay, so it's considered to a level to be maybe a little bit more feminine. Mother Earth, Father Sky, Father Heaven.
Right.
Okay, so Father in heaven, but Mother on earth. And to an extent, most religions at one point are a form of government. So there's always that part that is self-interest.
Institutionalized.
Exactly. So, and paganism is not. It's just so.
But what is your take on pagan beliefs and the symbolism appearing in these religions? Because it's apparent. it's blaringly obvious. There's no hiding it.
It's done on purpose because, see, that's an easier way to convert pagans, is if you keep the structure the same. You can still do what you do. It's just now it's for this, it's for Jesus, or now it's for Muhammad, or now it's for this. You can still do this. Okay. In fact, we had this festival around this time, but we're going to change it to the winter solstice, so you can still do that. So, you're not going to call it Yule anymore. You're going to call it Christmas. See what I mean? Incidentally, Christmas is one of the most pagan forms of practice. The tree, everything, all of that is just all very strong
Even
pagan
Easter
symbols.
And the bunny.
Easter, all of them. Okay, and it's just following nature is all it is. So the reason I think that it's going to be posed as negative is just to make sure, no, you don't want to do that. Even we're doing something over here that's very similar, but you have to do it this way because this is the right way. So it's just a way of kind of, that's why I always say converting, but it was really more of a forced type of thing. And they would adopt the practices to make it easier for the transition. Okay, but now I just say, well, as long as you're doing it, and you can find the reason behind it. That's why I love to go to churches, because they're still observing all of that, and I'm still seeing the beauty in all that, but I can bring my own perspective to it and find the truth in it for myself.
Yeah.
That's it.
One of the things that I'm going to say, one of the hardest things that I even till today I still wrestle with, just to, in a small degree, sometimes large, sometimes small degree, is that all of these organizations, the world religions, they are riddled with paganism, and they are riddled with storylines going back to Sumerian text, Babylonian text,
Mithras, all of that,
right? And they really are. If you read the literature and you compare the two, it's obvious that one came from the other. For me, and it's hard because from my logistic mind and from my place of needing to create practicality around something and make sense of it, and not just be like, oh, this guy said it because he read it out of a book and interpreted it this way, so now this is what I'm going to just go and believe and accept it. I don't have that bone.
I can't either.
Which is really hard, because a lot of people that I know who do have that bone and who are very, very strong Christian, very strong Catholic.
Yes.
They'll bring up topics like, I'm worried about your salvation, and you haven't accepted Jesus Christ as this, and it's one of those things where it's like, I think you can relate to this.
Oh, yeah.
I've so many times said, hey, if that's what it is, if that's what needs to be going on, please, I have no resistance there, right. But it never comes.
No.
And
Exactly.
it can lead you in this place of like, am I just not? And I had this conversation with the pastor that recently said it, and this was kind of my explanation, was that, am I just not worthy of that? Am I just not good? Am I just not chosen? Is it bypassing me? Well, it's something that could show up later on. No, but the thing is God says knock and I will answer. Correct. And I'm knocking and no one's answering. Right. So is it that I am being answered? I'm just being told, hey, listen, this is not a narrative that you need to engage in, because it's not a true narrative. It's a really hard thing to wrestle with, and I don't know if you've ever had anything like this happen to you.
The amount of people who come up to me and just are trying to save me. The thing is, the reason you didn't receive a narrative is you already created your own. You already have a narrative. What do you need another one for?
Yeah.
You don't need somebody else's narrative. Whenever I see something when it's very organized and very rule-based, you've got to think, well, where did those rules come from? They had to come from somewhere originally. So if those rules don't resonate with you, I would have people telling me, oh, I'm evil, I'm going to hell because I don't follow Christian faith, and they're sitting there telling me this while they're chawing down on a cheeseburger. Okay, now if you read the Bible, and you go, because I've read it cover to cover, and I'm sure you have, all right, that there are passages in the Bible, if you go through all of the rules in the Bible, you cannot eat the meat
with the
dairy, because it's residing in its mother's milk. That is actually a passage in the Bible. I bring that up to somebody, they don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, the terminology, actually, you can find it in Vedic literature too, is you don't bathe the calf in its mother's milk.
Exactly. Yeah. And all of these tenets are in all of these beliefs, but you're getting people who are telling you that you can't be saved unless you follow them, and they don't even know all of them. They don't even know them yet. And that doesn't even mean anything, honestly. That is just a guideline that was created at some point.
Yeah. You know, in the Bible, if you actually go back and if you've really read the Bible cover to cover,
right.
as you have kind of said, which I think people pretend that they do, or they say that they do.
They say that they do.
Interpretation that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, that Jesus Christ is God, and that the only way you can be saved and not go to hell for eternity is if you accept that narrative, is actually a little skewed. Yes. Because, number one, there is never an actual narrative, even in the translation from Aramaic to Latin to Greek, there's never ever the statement that Jesus says, if you don't accept me as God, then you are damned to hell for all of eternity. That statement does not exist.
He never calls himself God. He says Son of Man. He never actually says.
Well, there's references there.
There
where
are
it
references,
says,
but he never flat out says what you're saying.
No,
like exactly.
Especially if you're going into Aramaic translation and Hebrew translation and Latin. The farther you go back into the translation, the more apparent it becomes that actually those words are never completely sent down the middle. One of the things Jesus will say, though, is like, the Father and I am one.
Right.
But I could say that too.
Correct.
And so could you.
Correct.
Once I have that relationship.
But if you say that to somebody who is very indoctrinated, then you are a heretic.
Correct.
Right? But that was what, if you look at the teachings, that's what he was trying to teach. That's exactly what he was trying to teach, because if you look at it, he took the disciples and he sent them out to do healing, exactly what he did. So he was sending out his disciples to do, he gave them that power to do that, basically through the teachings, through the instruction guide, through the owner's manual. You went out and you go forth and you do these things. So that's the whole idea, is that you are trying to find the Christ within. Maybe the Christ is your higher self.
Yeah.
Okay? And the higher self is basically what's going to guide you through. So you're trying to find that level of self-mastery.
And I think that, again, if I can, because it is something I struggle with, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Because I would love that to be, I would love it to be that easy.
Right.
I mean, I would love to, it would be so nice to be in the headspace of all I got to do is believe that, and I can just kind of do whatever I want, and I'm forgiven for...
No, I mean, you go to confession and you're fine.
I mean, I would love to exist in that headspace, but my sense of responsibility and consciousness won't allow me to get there. And this is where that kind of comes into play, which is that, again, I am there, I'm knocking, I'm saying, God, if Christ is the Messiah and I need to accept, please put it in my heart, and I'm totally cool with it. And I've done it 1,000 times over, because every time I have a conversation with someone, because I am not that naive, or I'm not that egotistical to think that I know something. I'm open to whatever God wants from me.
Right.
Whatever that is. I don't really care what it is, as long as it's clear to me.
Right.
And what I was explaining was that, if you really read the way that Christ is wording things, even in the English translation, which is quite skewed.
Yeah,
but
very skewed.
Even if you read the actual translation, what Christ is saying is like, okay, I'm here and I'm setting number one, I'm setting the example. You want to get it done, this is how you do it. That's why Christ says, I am the way.
Correct.
Right? Because this is how you get it done. You want to get it done, and
this is the formula. These are the earth rules.
This is the roadmap.
This is the
guide.
The owner's manual.
Here's the owner's manual.
That's basically all it is.
Here it is. I'm going to do it for you.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that Christ, like Moses, I think we were at a state in that period of time where God was like, dude.
Agreed.
Where it's
agreed.
Here comes the next flood. And I think that instead of that happening, Christ came and died, and so that extinction level event didn't happen.
Well,
and so that's my interpretation of it.
What's very interesting, you just tied that into Lammas. Remember how you cut down the one for the many?
Yeah.
And that's probably why you were so very connected to it, because that's the idea. In order to have the harvest, you have to cut down the one as a sacrifice to feed all.
Yeah.
So he sets that example. Basically, I'm willing to die on this hill that you can find salvation through this formula. And I will not compromise my beliefs for it, to open other people's eyes.
And no debate that Christ probably was a savior. And
Absolutely.
At that time, just like Moses said,
Absolutely.
if you take them, you take me. And this was even the next step further.
Correct.
Which is that, okay, I am going to give myself in this terrible way.
Yes.
In order for everyone to get more time. I'm going to buy you more time. Because the truth of the matter is, when I sit down with a very strong-willed Christian, and someone who's absolute,
yes,
what I will say to that person is that, you say Christ died for our sins on the cross and that we're all forgiven and all these other things, but what's the difference between yesterday and today?
Right.
Nothing has changed. We're still responsible for all of these things.
That's right.
You can't take out a credit card, rack up the debt on the credit card, and then say, hey, someone else will pay it for me.
Yeah.
Which is what you're saying.
That's what you're saying.
That's essentially what you're saying, is that I can rack up credit card debt and I could just,
Yeah, and then just repent, and it's like it never happened.
And I think that it's what's happening on the liberal front nowadays, where people who consider themselves, the large percentage of people who consider themselves to be liberal, are actually the antithesis of liberal. Because the idea behind liberal is free thinking, open to other people's ideas and theories. But if I sit down with someone who's extreme liberal as it's defined today, not its actual definition, but the New Age definition of liberal, if I sit down with someone and I would be completely open to hearing them out soup to nuts, even if it was something that made zero sense to me, I would still respect that person and what they were saying. But if I come and tell them my perspective and challenge any of their narratives, then this is where cancel culture comes into play.
Yes, exactly.
Don't challenge mine, which again is not merciful.
No.
And this is what I try to tell absolute religious people, is that you're saying that God is the most merciful, all merciful, yet your narrative lacks mercy.
Well, everything, see, the thing is that whatever you are saying that God is, you must emulate in order to bring God to earth.
Yeah.
You must emulate it. So if you say, Lord have mercy, if you say that, you must have mercy.
Yeah.
You're saying it, you're putting it out there. So you cannot put something out that you're not willing to do. So you're going to profess these beliefs and everything. You must have them. So if you want someone to accept what you're doing, you want somebody to be open-minded, you have to create that first. You can't expect somebody to do something you're not willing to do.
It's what's handicapping us as a society.
It is.
And as a species.
It is.
It's the handicapping because it puts people in the direction of individualism.
Correct.
Which is completely the antithesis.
It's
Again,
the complete
opposite.
Because your whole path is to finding out how you're connected to
I'm concerned with your salvation.
Right.
I'm saved.
Right.
I'm not. But I'm concerned, dude. We're linked at the hip.
Of course, So if you believe in something I don't believe, I want to know about it so it will help me shape my beliefs better. Because if we sat down and you gave me the exact same questions a year from now, I'd have different answers, or at least I should, because I should have grown and evolved. So this conversation would never be the same. But if I stay in that same, just cycle of belief, my answers will always be the same. And where's the growth in that? You change, you evolve, you look different. I'm going to look different a year from now.
For sure, you're right.
Everything's going to be different a year from now.
So
your beliefs have to be different. Yep.
Even
an hour.
Yeah. It could change like this
that
on you.
Like that after one conversation. And that's why you've got to listen. You've got to be open, and you cannot cancel somebody else's belief because they have information that you don't have. And it can help to bring you to the next level, whether you feel it is right or not. Because there's a lot of things I hear that I don't necessarily think are, don't resonate with me, but they still help to shape my belief. It kind of goes to that whole idea of coyote teaching in Native American, where they show you the opposite in order to get you to get a point. Like for example, maybe you have a grandfather working with his grandchild, and he'll spell a word wrong on purpose. So the little child will go, "Grandpa, you spelled that wrong," just to make sure he knows how to spell the word.
One of the things that I also, as we're on this topic, is that I've on many occasions explained to people, especially people who are religious, that if it was me and I was on the other side of it and I was Jesus, let's just don't murder me for saying that, but at the same time, it's like I wouldn't be judging people who are coming to the gate of heaven based off of, like, you didn't accept me as God, dude, you're going to hell.
No.
That's that's wild.
Look at his followers. They were all from different places, all from different forms of,
right.
Just all at different levels. People that they were not expected to be chosen. Okay, you wouldn't expect that. He would have dinner. He would have break bread with people, and they were saying, Rabbi, this is not worthy of you. Who are you to say?
Right.
Who are we to say? Because that's you anyway. That's you. That's just a different aspect of you.
Sure
Maybe
is.
that was you 5 years ago. You don't even know. I mean, that's why it's crazy to sit there and just box it in.
Well, the narrative that you'll get coming back to you is that you can't put yourself in God's head. You're using yourself as a beacon for understanding God. Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
What else do I have?
Exactly.
What else do I have?
And how and who is to say what is in God's head?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Because
how can you tell me that I'm not in alignment with what is in God's head? How does any of us know? Well, it's just that little higher self that is connected to.
It's the absolutism.
Exactly.
And I've said this many times to people where it's like, imagine we put someone who is a rabbi and we take an Orthodox priest, right? And we put the two of them together.
Mm-hmm.
Never, no matter how many years down the road, will they ever come to an agreement,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're damned, and they will never, ever come to an agreement. And this is the exact opposite of spiritualism. It's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
The reason that we're in the shitty mess that we're currently in is because of the borders and the boundaries and the lines of separation and me versus you and you versus me and let's go to war because this is the exact opposite of the evolution of our species.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about aliens and people who are civilizations that are potentially able to traverse the known universe, do you think they got there by fighting with each other over the border of a land? No way. No way.
No.
They all come together and they all work on the same goal, same project in order to that you're talking about traversing time, space, and motion.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not doing that inside of yourself, how are you going to do that on an external level?
Right.
And this is what I always try to tell people. Again, it's not the narrative they want to hear because there's so much luxury to this. I get to just wipe it under the rug,
yes.
and someone else takes responsibility for me and my actions.
Right.
Why do you think that that's so lucrative to people?
Well, there's a lot of ego in it. That there's that whole sense of identity. They've built like their whole way that they think of themselves around this belief system. So if I let it go, who am I now? I have to do work now. It's not all laid out for me now.
Yeah.
I have to take responsibility now. And that's where it can get scary. It's kind of like that one person. There's always that one person you graduate from high school and they're still stuck in high school. They never quite leave it. And they go back to, I was this big person when I was in high school and I was this and I was that, and they never quite get beyond that. They never move forward with that because at that point they would have to find their own way. They felt good and confident in that arena, but once you leave it, now who are you?
Yeah.
You got to start over. And that is a lot of work and responsibility. And that goes back to that whole overnight success. It takes a good 15 years because you've got to be ready to do the work. And not everybody is, and not everybody wants to.
Well, speaking of the work, it just, from knowing you and really, again, diving deep into your narratives on your media, your website, it just, you've done so many things, and you are currently doing so many things.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what fundamentally drives you to do thing after thing after thing after thing, and what is the mission statement around it?
I just feel very driven. And I think it goes back to that moment where I was saying, like, when I was teaching in that one moment, that I felt more like a part of me woke up. And so I feel like that's my contribution, is to just constantly be challenging my own, just stretching myself more and reaching out more and more to others. I just feel like my responsibility is my voice.
So your mission statement essentially is to, again, I'm going to kind of inject myself here to some degree, which is that I feel the vibe I get from you is that, like, you're there for, your worst enemy could probably come to your door and be like, I need help, and you'd be like, oh, what's up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is really where we all want to get to.
Actually, that has happened.
Yeah.
I have had people that I have really butted heads with, and then they have come to me and...
It's all behind.
Of course, because it doesn't matter.
It's the humility of the situation. And
plus, at the time you butted heads, you were a different person anyway. You're not that person anymore.
Yeah.
You can never go through, you're always different after an experience. So I may have butted heads at you at this time, but you're different now and I'm different now. So now I want to get to know you as you are, and I want you to get to know me as I am now and see how far we've come.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a validation. If you feel drawn to come to me and at one point you didn't, well, perhaps I did something right. And that's good. That is a help to me. That is a gift to me.
Yeah.
So I really feel like if somebody came to me, I would honestly feel like they would be helping me more than I'd be helping them.
What I also try to iterate in my own life is that I'm going to reflect what you send in my direction. And I'm no Jesus Christ character. I'm not by any means any of these things, but at the same time, what you're bringing to my, because thank God a million times for me as a person, I'm very happy with who I'm okay here.
Yeah.
Me, my circle, who I am, what I'm actually really okay with it. I'm not like going to bed at night and being like, oh man, I'm not okay with myself. I'm very proud of myself.
Good.
And I'm very happy with who I've become. And the thing is that when you enter into that space where you have achieved that, which is kind of what we were talking about before, when you become that, the self-mastery that we were talking about, when you become that and you're so happy with, those situations just get drastically more. The people who have not gotten there start showing up on your doorstep so much more frequently. The further you go into your own self-understanding and mastery, the more people who are just lost and in chaos show up on your doorstep. And it's blaringly crazy. And I don't know if you experienced that as well.
Very much. Very, very much. I noticed that there's always this, it's almost like, you plateau for a while and then you get to this next level and this next level. And very much so. I'm actually really glad that you said that, because it reminds me. I mean, sometimes I can look around and what I'm seeing, what's coming to me, and sometimes it can be painful.
It's painful and overwhelming.
Painful and very overwhelming. I mean, the level of responsibility. I've had people come through the door and tell me that the reason they came through the door is because I came to them in a dream and I told them this, and the level that they're throwing at me, like people I've never met before. I had one woman drive up from Virginia because she had to see me. And then when she saw me, I came into I think this was in my Sugarloaf store, and I came into the room and she was standing there. She took one look at me, she burst into tears. And then she came up and she touched me and she goes, okay, I'm good now. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
And that was it. And it was, for me, it was a little terrifying. But then I realized it's more what I represent to them, not who I actually am. So, I'm just a reflection of some aspect of themselves. Yeah. And it also keeps me from taking myself too seriously, in a way. So, but yes, that does happen, and that's why something like this is so important, where I can talk about this. But I really am, the one big consolation is that I'm very happy with my life. Like, I really love the life I'm living, and I really believe in everything that I'm doing, and the people that are the closest to me bring me great joy and connection. I mean, I really love this life I've built.
But with that comes...
But that's the part that makes it doable.
It is. It's what allows you to continue.
Correct. Yeah, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And I think that's why a lot of people come to me and they'll say, I don't know how you do it. And they don't realize that the life that I did carve through everything, that I have done has made my private, my circle so beautiful and such a good fit that it makes the other part doable. So that's that in between heaven and hell type of thing.
And now I want to kind of go in this direction, which is like, I think a little bit more of an advanced spiritual understanding around people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I deal with on a frequent level, where I currently am in my process and in my level, is that people who are very negative show up in my life.
Yes.
The thing is I understand that the reason that this is happening is because I need to get myself on this level of mercy that is much higher than where I currently am. Yes. Where I'm not judging you by the fact that you're bringing negativity into my life or you're making my life difficult. I need to see you showing up and treat you in the way that I know I should be treating you. I'm just not there yet, and I think that it's so important to admit that kind of thing.
Yes.
Where I think that people who are gurus and masters and all of those other things, you never really hear those narratives coming out of their mouth. You never hear them, painting themselves in a human way and saying, because the thing is if you're still here in this world, I don't care what kind of guru or, I don't care if you're the Pope, if you're still here in this world, it's because your work is not done.
Damn straight.
And for you to pretend like you've done it all and you've achieved it, you're not only lying to yourself, you're lying to everybody who's looking up to you.
Right.
That's where I'm at right now.
That's your challenge. See, I think everybody's is a little different, so they get different people coming to them.
Yeah.
So yours is mercy. Mine is always claiming my own power. I get people who come in and challenge me, power-wise. Okay. Because it goes back to that was the whole reason that my mother put me into martial arts, because I didn't know my own power, and my husband always tell me, be the master, just do this, step forward and do your thing. And I always feel like I need validation from somebody else. Mm-hmm. Or something. That's always been something that I struggle with. I need this approval, or I need this acceptance, or I need to be reflected in a certain way. I need you to let me know it's okay in order for me to do this. So the people I tend to attract are people who come in very strong and try to impose their way on me. Mm. So I have to learn how to stand up in a way that is not throwing their force back at them. I need to learn how to show power in the face of force, because I don't want, there's always that people pleasing in that part of me. That is my great challenge. Yours is mercy. I think everybody's challenge is different, and they attract the people who teach them coyote teaching by giving them the opposite of it to make it come up in you. And that's what I feel, why you attract the people. So when you start attracting that, it's showing that you're at a higher level of self-mastery because you're getting challenged more.
Yeah. No, I feel like I am at, I'm getting up there in the, I feel that. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that the price that comes with this that's really the thing that's the most hardest to explain to anybody ever. And Jesus even said you can be a prophet anywhere except your own house.
Yeah.
And not that I want to be, but it's what how much relevance to that statement? It's because that's who you want to help the most,
exactly,
and that's who you can help the least.
The least, and it's hard. It's hard because when it's that close, but it also shows you, how hard it is to fix ourselves as well, because there's nothing closer than your own self. So sometimes it can be very difficult, and that can also remind you what other people are facing when you're looking at them going, really, I can't believe I'm going through this again with you. And then you go back on it and you're saying, well, you know what, how many times did I have to face that and go through this? So I can be a little bit more merciful, or I can be a little bit more understanding, or I can be a little bit. But really, the people who are the closest to you are the ones who are going to challenge you the most.
And that's kind of the thing I wanted to just kind of to make this final point for me personally on this topic that we're in right now, is that what people might not understand until they get to that place is that once you've gotten to the place where you're happy with yourself and where you're good with yourself, the level of difficulty goes up so drastically.
Yes.
All of these little levels that you wind up getting, it's a step at a step, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a point on the ladder that when you get to this very specific step on the ladder, the gap between that step and the next one is a new kind of gap.
Yes.
And I'm in a
Yeah.
place like that right now,
Yes.
which is, again, the emotion and I can't explain it. Again, it's something that I'm bringing up here because I feel like you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's one of those
I
things
do.
where it can make you feel very alone.
Yes. I'm going to use an example. It's not quite. It seems like a simple example.
Yeah.
But I know that you're going to understand where I'm coming from. When you are faced with the next big step, whatever the next big step is, you get the level of challenges shape you in order to be that person at that next step. So, for example, when we were trying to manifest this big store that we were in, which is now, it's like 8,000 square feet, right before some very specific, difficult challenges came up that were just, it just seemed insane. And also trying to get this place ready in 2.5 weeks. I mean, I've never been more exhausted in my entire life. And it was just at the point where I was just literally crying from exhaustion. And I realized that if I can't handle that, I can't handle the next level. So it's basically those experiences, what those challenges coming at you are readying you to be up at that next level. So they're shaping the next step. So you wouldn't get that challenge because it's got to make you bigger. You have to be big enough to handle this big building because there's going to be all these responsibilities coming with it. So we're going to throw all these challenges at you and basically like temper you in fire, temper the steel in flames in order to make it strong.
Yeah. And this is the conundrum of when people tell you need to take a break and when you need to rest. And you can't explain to somebody
that this is part of the
process. This is where
this is the process.
Yeah, but you've always been pushing, but you don't understand it. If you're moving from level to level, from ring on the ladder to if you're moving through, there is no place on the ladder that says stop.
No.
There's no place on the ladder at all. I could be completely wrong.
No, there's not.
But what you'll get from somebody is that, they will think that I'm wrong, and they will think that I'm a masochist, or they will think that I'm not taking care of myself, or that I'm not resting, or all of these things. But the thing is that the urgency of climbing up the ladder is nonstop.
That's the process. I mean, it's just everything is constantly changing, moving. Like, for example, you can't. I mean, it's actually proven in our universe. It's impossible to stand still, okay? Because everything is in motion. So even if we're just sitting here and we're not moving, everything is moving. Your blood is coursing through your veins.
Proven.
There's scientifically, it's just what you see in the world around you proves to you can't stop because the Earth is rotating and rotating on its axis, and your blood is circulating and you're breathing. There's constant motion. It's absolutely impossible to stop. So if the Earth isn't stopping and you're on Earth rules, how are you going to think you're going to stop? That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just look at the world around you. Look at the way the Earth operates. That's your blueprint right there. So if nothing is stopping and you're constantly seeing some form of development, either that plant is growing or that plant is dying or this is happening or this is happening, day is going into night, night is going into day, there's constant movement, why would you stop?
Yeah.
That is not the world that we live in. That is not who we are. Okay, we are on a journey constantly. And to stop in the middle of it is unrealistic.
How do you read between the lines? Someone shows up and they want to put on a personality, right? Everyone's wearing a mask.
Yep.
And everyone has a million masks for a million different occasions. But to get to the actual essence of a person, who a person actually is on a fundamental level, you can't do that unless a person tells you, or that's what you would think.
Right.
Actually, you can't do that by what a person tells you. It's actually the opposite.
It's the opposite.
You will never get to the essence of a person based on their words.
Right.
True statement.
That's absolutely 100%. It's actually more what they're not saying is what's giving you the information.
Right.
So I usually sit there, and what I do is I call it, and my husband hears this all the time, I get a hit. So I take one look at somebody, and it just all of a sudden, okay? Now what happens is everybody gets that. Everybody gets that much information when they look at somebody. However, if you have not reached a certain level of self-mastery, there's so much noise in your head, you can't hear that download. So if you can get to the point where you have a little bit more of a silence, there's a little bit more of a calm within that storm, that's where the download goes. It goes right into that calm. And I will look at somebody and I'll immediately, boom, I'll know. I'll know if I'm going to have a connection with that person. I'll know if I'm going to be dealing with that person on a regular basis. I'll know there's some type of connection. And I'm going to get a certain level of information. And the more I talk to them, the more I get. Half the time, not listening to them at all. I'm just getting a read. I'm listening to this. I'm listening to higher self saying, this is what's going on. This is what, this is the type of energy you're going to be dealing with. This is what you need to pay attention to. Things like that. And I will get these weird little hits, that's what I call them, and they're downloads. So I would say about 75% of the time, when it looks like I'm listening to somebody, I am, but I'm listening to the information that I'm getting off of them, not as much their words in the beginning. Then after a while, I have the information I need, and then I can start to engage a little bit more. But a lot of the times, I'm downloading, especially if I touch them. Then it comes through very strong. But I am at the point now where if I can lock eyes on them, and if I can get myself quiet enough, I will get a full-on download. And that was one of the most important skills I had to learn, is that, just to be calm within the face of all that. You have to be that eye of the storm to have somewhere for that download to be heard. That's what it is. So if you can maintain that sense of self-mastery, you can hear the download, which are always there. It's a collective. You have access to all of this information all the time. It's just not everybody gets themselves to the level where they can hear the frequency.
Well, what I think is interesting about that, because in my years of building this business, which requires a lot to go from zero to what I currently have here, there's a lot involved. Yes. Like a very large amount involved in that, which it's not even worth telling the details of. But what winds up happening over the course of time, and as you're dealing with physical growth, or economic growth, if you will, what winds up happening there is that you have to cultivate and develop that bone.
Yes.
That muscle.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
If you don't have that intuition around who's in front of you, success is going to be very distant from you.
Yes.
You have to know who you're dealing with, and the thing is that no one is ever going to tell you who you're dealing with.
A lot of people, sometimes you'll hear it like on very higher levels of operating, and I don't want to make this mistake like saying, I'm at this higher level or something. It's not a hierarchical thing. This is really more like when you're dealing with this level of outreach with the community or something. Okay, you deal with a lot of people. Okay, I deal with a lot of people, and if you cannot read them in an instant, you don't belong in that realm. That's basically what it is. But how long did it take you to get to learn to read people in that instant? And so you have earned every right to be in that realm. But if you get thrown in that realm and you haven't built that skill, you ain't gonna last.
No.
That's why there's things like you can go viral and you can find yourself in that realm, but you haven't earned your place there. So you might not last if you don't learn the lessons.
One-hit wonders.
Exactly. That's how that happens, where it happened very quickly, but they did not take the necessary steps to be able to maintain that level. Exactly. They don't have that muscle. So like a perfect example, it all goes back, I always bring it back to martial arts, is there was, I think it was the third year that I competed for my title, okay? And I went to the World Games, and there's a prelim before the finals, because the finals are televised. You're not going to watch everybody who's in the division. It would take forever. So you only want to see the top two. So you go through the prelims and they find the top two. Well, it was actually the very first time in the prelims where I came in second place, not first. But that doesn't count until you go for the finals and you go up again, and whoever wins out of those two gets the title. And somebody that no one had ever heard of placed first. Okay, now I found out later that the center ring judge happened to be her husband, but she hadn't flexed that muscle. She had gotten her black belt maybe 6 months before the competition even happened. She didn't know anything about it, and she was not prepared, because what happened is when the evening show came up and the level of pressure she could not handle, she actually fell on stage. And I felt bad for her because, she had to go up after me. And I went up, and I was very experienced and everything, and I came down and I wished her luck and everything. And she got up there, and you could see she did not belong there. She did not know what to do. And I felt very bad for her, even though she had, I had been facing a big level of injustice with her placing first, because her husband happened to be a centering judge, and he gave her such a high score that it threw the scores off and everything. So she was walking in, and everybody was wondering who she was. And then she had to face that she had basically fallen on TV.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate, but it's also a lesson. So, but like you said, she never built that muscle to learn how to deal with that situation.
That's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there, because one of the things that I've noticed, and again, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, is that sometimes you run into a person who is maybe a little damaged, right?
Right.
We're all damaged, but
Of course, yeah.
sometimes people are in that still.
Right.
Still processing
Right.
trauma, still going through the
Right.
damage control.
Yes.
And you meet these people, and on the outside, they don't have it together yet. They're making visible mistakes, or they're sick, especially now with the social media world.
Yeah.
One wrong word out of your mouth and you're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really interesting that I see that there's people who are still in damage control mode, who are still dealing with their traumas, who don't have it all together yet. And on a surface level, you would look at a person like that and be like, but with this ability that we're talking about, which is to read between the lines, you can actually see this person is in a great place right now.
Right. Right.
This is great news.
Yes, because it's the breakthrough.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a great new situation. And the fact that you're here in this situation right now means you've been doing work.
Exactly.
Right? Then, on the other hand, you meet somebody who likes to pretend that they know all of it and everything, and wants to trump you and think that they know everything, right? You meet these people who really are putting on the mask that they have it all together.
Yeah.
And what do we know about that person?
Well, the
Typically.
reason they're putting it, the reason they're putting on that mask is to just, it kind of goes back to that whole thing about, just the beliefs being in a box. I've had a lot of people, where I run into them and they try to trap me. They try to, they'll ask me certain questions, and if I don't answer them the right way, I must not know what I'm talking about. So, one wrong, like you said, one wrong word, boom, you're done.
Right.
And they test it constantly, okay? And honestly, if you're trying that hard to test somebody else, you're not focused on your own work. You're focused outside of yourself, okay? So it's a way of shirking responsibility if you think about it. Because if you're that worried about the other person, I can understand somebody where, you're calling BS on something. Yeah, obviously, if there's something that not to be true, you want to question that. You have to question that. That's your responsibility. But if that's all you're doing, and you're not adding anything to the narrative when you do it, then what are you doing? That's just ego. You're trying to make yourself feel better by disproving this other person.
Everyone can read between those lines.
Exactly.
No matter what level you're on.
Exactly.
But I think more the case there too is that, because I run into this very frequently, where the person who appears to be the most put together, or who likes to present that,
is usually the least put together. Yeah.
It hasn't even reached that place yet of the person who is going through their breakthroughs and their traumas, right? And then you have the person who pops through and breaks on through the other side, right? And let me tell you something, the person who pops through that and breaks through to the other side is probably one of the quietest people
Always.
You'll get your hands on.
Always.
There's no need to justify, there's no need to because your focus now goes to this place of, what am I doing? Right?
Exactly.
Which is what you were saying, but I just again trying to.
That was beautiful. I love the way you put that. But really, it's because the judgmentalism is gone. There's no judging at that point.
Right.
You know,
and also self-mastery.
Self-mastery.
Being
no
good with
to.
yourself.
Yeah, there's no reason to. I mean, you know, if honestly, you see somebody going through that, that's really one of the most beautiful things there is, when somebody's going through that, because they're trying, they're
raw.
changing. Because one of the hardest things in the world is to change your mind. That's one of the most difficult things to do, because it's the key to everything. Right. You change your mind, you change your experience. So when somebody's in the midst of changing their mind, that is the most beautiful thing there is. That's why when somebody breaks an addiction, they're changing their mind. That's why you don't get on them for having that addiction in the first place. You look at like, wow, you know, you busted through that. You faced your demons. You did the most difficult thing there is to do on the earth, because when you change your mind, you change your world.
Yeah.
So that's, and then once you've done that, you know, once you've broken that kind of glass ceiling, it's a lot easier to change your mind after that. You're much more fluid.
Well, this is also what I was associating with this absolutism, where when you run into people, where you know, especially in political situations and in religious situations, you run into a lot of absolutism, where free thinking is now off the table.
No, and nobody wants to change their mind.
This is, in my opinion, a very unevolved way of viewing the world around you. Right. This is just my humble opinion, and I don't like, you know, quite honestly, to some degree, I do envy the person who has it all figured out, where there's no more, you know, like, I don't actually, but like I see the value in like, you know, you know, it's like there's so little work and so little responsibility to absolutism. Yeah, it's like completely devoid of real responsibility.
Exactly.
And like, like, you know,
it would be so much easier.
You can put the egg down for a minute there.
Yeah, it would be so much easier.
You really can. You can put the egg down there. So I understand the lucrativity of
absolutely. But it, like you said, you know, going back to the egg, you can't uncook an egg. So once you realize that, you know, that absolutism is like, you know, preventing growth, you can't go back to it. Once those scales have fallen off of your eyes, and that's, you know, just like a whole, you know, that's going back to biblical you know, symbolism, you can't go back to it anyway. So as much as we would like to say, you know, oh, I'd love to be able to just follow this directive and be, you know, and just achieve everything I'm trying to achieve, but it's not. And I think that's why I'll notice I can be working with some people and they might get very frustrated with me, because they'll just say, well, just tell me what I need to do to get this. And I can't, because you have to get yourself there. I can tell you things that will help you to bust out of what you're doing and thinking right now. I can kind of shed a light and a different perspective on what you're doing right now and how that's not serving you anymore. But I can't tell you what to do. Only you can tell you what to do. And people will get very frustrated with me, and maybe sometimes they'll step away from my teachings because they feel like I'm not giving them enough direction. But it's not my job to give you direction. It's just my job to help you approach it in many directions.
It's also, in my opinion, it's not the right thing to do is to give someone the answer.
You can't. Because their answer is different anyway.
You can't, even when someone's asking for advice, you really can't give them the answer. But you know, just to kind of finish talking on this one particular topic just a little bit more, is that, you know, like as I was mentioning to you, the last year of my life has been extremely interesting for me. The introspection and the perspective that I'm, you know, falling myself into. So I did a good climb on this proverbial ladder that we've been speaking about. And again, you know, it's kind of an egotistical thing to say, and I know how someone would take it in an egotistical way, who's not climbing.
Right.
And again, that's not a slight. It's perspective.
That's it.
But, you know, as I was kind of describing to you before, you know, I'm going to say there was like 3 steps on the ladder that needed to be taken over the last year. The 3 of which I feel like but you know what benchmarks are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like I hit those 3 benchmarks in the time that they needed to be hit, and then I hit that.
Nice.
That bridge, right? That big gap where you need to now figure out, how do I make the leap, because it's no longer a step anymore.
No, it's a quantum leap.
It's a quantum leap. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. it's a leap now, and you can't you only get one shot.
That's it.
Have you ever seen these the freestyle rock climbers that don't put any hooks on them and stuff like this, right?
That terrifies me.
What? Like, right? A solo, like a free solo, I think it's called something to this.
Yeah. There's a special.
There was a movie or a documentary about this guy Alex something.
Yes.
I watched it, and he's climbing up these mountains with
nothing. Yeah.
Lunatic.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
No, that ain't happening.
Sorry. That's just you playing with your life in a way that's not responsible.
No.
In my personal opinion. Again, amazing what you're doing.
I admire it.
I'm glued to the screen.
Absolutely.
But the reason everyone's glued to the screen is because we're in a life or death situation now, right? But my point is that, when you watch these guys who climb these mountains without any kind of rope or anything attached to them, they only get one shot at that leap. And those I wish I could explain that a little bit deeper, but you get to that ring, and then people call it plateauing, or hitting the ceiling, or hitting a wall. No. It's not a plateau.
No.
It's not a wall. It's time to now say, okay, I need to go back, look at all of the things that I've learned and gained over this, because I need all of it. Right? Every step has a reason and a purpose, and you need to make sure that you're incorporating that. Anyway, one of the things I started doing when I got to that ring was I was like, okay, it's my time to start educating.
Right.
I felt that. I mean, which I've been in that place before in my life, but when I hit that ring on that ladder, I was like, it's time for me to start educating, and I jumped into it.
Yes.
Bad move. For me. I wound up at the door, and I was like, I'm here, right? And it was like, I wasn't ready to do that, and I was doing live lectures and things like that, and I was teaching. I was doing mostly biblical study, talking about the Old Testament, what it actually meant, which is my expertise is Old Testament breakdowns. Anyway, eventually, after long enough, I started to realize, like, okay, and people were like, can you please put these live on YouTube, and can you record the lectures and put them up? And I was like, I knew I wasn't there yet for that, so I didn't do that. But what the point was is that I got to that point where I realized, like, dude, slow down, patience, that's where you need to go. That's what the next ring is. You need to make this leap first.
Yes.
And then when you're there, that's when
you'll hit that.
Correct.
It's very funny. I was having this conversation yesterday with my husband. When we first started the shop, it was a little teeny. I think just maybe, I can't remember how much space it was, maybe 500 square feet. It was small. And we were like looking at what we wanted to build there and everything. And I kept talking about the classes. I said, so I'm going to have this school. We're going to start doing these classes, right? And I would tell him the classes, and he was kind of looking at me like, we don't even have anybody coming into the shop yet. What are you talking about? I'm doing these classes. And I was designing all these manuals, and I was getting ready. And I would throw a class, and nobody would come to it. They didn't know what the heck I was talking about. Or maybe one or two people, and the one or two people who did come were kind of thinking the class was going to be completely different than what it was. But, I kept doing my thing. And I realize now that what I was doing then, I'm actually using all of those manuals that I wrote then, now. Like 7, 8 years later. Okay, of it was done there.
Would you say that's like kind of getting ahead of yourself?
Yes and no. What it was doing is it was blueprinting for here. Because everything that I was doing, I was wondering why it wasn't working. But it was because the timing wasn't right. But I was basically collecting everything that I needed, so when the timing hit, I was prepared. So, yes and no.
Would you equate that to saying, like, you need to make the mistake so that you don't make the mistake?
When you need to be able to pull it off.
Right.
Yeah, make the mistakes in practice, not in the ring.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So, I made the mistakes in practice.
I think that's really solid.
Exactly. And because once you're in the ring, you don't want to be doing that.
I think
so you make them, and that's why you do it 1,000 times.
Why I asked you the last question, I asked you about seeing below the surface level of people and things like that, is because I meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
I meet very affluent people. I meet very traumatized, hurt people. I mean, the spectrum for me is huge. Vast. Yeah. It's like so vast. And you really stood out to me. The first time I met you and your husband, actually, I had a conversation with you.
Like the first time we were here, it was.
Well, it was actually the other warehouse.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, but the first time, I think that one of the very first times.
No, the first time.
It was the first time,
yeah.
Right? And I remember it was like this huge conversation in the parking lot, and we were just absolutely riveted. And you told me things you would never tell somebody that you just met, and I told you things I would never tell somebody I first met. But I just
not a normal
thing at all. But I knew it was a safe conversation. I knew it was the right person to be saying these things to, immediately.
Yeah.
Like you came in and I just download, and I usually get like a visceral reaction. My hands start to shake a little bit, and I go, okay, this is where the energy is.
You know, one of the things that I feel personally, that I have this really great sensibility of what someone's intentions actually are, because there's so many different levels to reading and understanding who's standing in front of you, right? Like you said, someone could be talking to you and you're not even processing what they're saying, because what you're processing is the actual data.
Correct.
Right. And one of the things that's extremely relevant to me is, for example, I have a kid that works for me. His name is Tom.
Okay.
Right. And when so many people come for interviews here. So many people want to work here. We're getting resumes, and it's a lot. It's nothing personal ever with anybody. I am extremely selective.
Yes.
I
you have to be.
I am as selective as a human being could be, to the point where I'm willing to do the extra work of 2 or 3 people just because I don't want to hire the wrong person for that job. Right?
Same here.
So with that being said, when I met Tom, and this has happened to me many, many, many other times, but Tom is still here and Tom's been here for a while. I hired Tom as he was walking in the door.
Yes.
I didn't even need to have a conversation with him. He walked through the door and I asked him, I broke his, I have a...
Right, yeah, a process.
He was hired before, as he was walking in the door, he was already hired. Same thing happened with Gabby, the girl who's here helping me with it, right? She came in, she sat down on the couch, she was already hired.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a 10-minute conversation with her, but she was already hired. Same thing goes for so many people that have come to work.
That's how you do a reading too. You get all the information and everything, and I might be throwing out the cards, but I already have all the information.
Every time that I've ever hired out of necessity, it backfires on me so bad that anyway, now I'm in this place where I understand that, and I'd rather not take that proverbial rest and break that people are talking about, because I prefer to beat myself on this end as opposed to the other end, where you bring somebody else into it.
Yes.
Easier to be on your own here.
It's easier, It's just like there's more responsibility on the other end.
Yeah.
That's why.
And what's interesting is that there's been so many times where, and I'm just going to give away a little bit of a secret about myself, which is the right people for me are those people that I was talking to you about that are in that space where they're still dealing with they're in it.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the right people.
Yes.
And if you can pick up on that, and those are the kinds of people you want to work with.
Absolutely.
Because humility is on the table.
Yes.
Openness is on the table. Willingness is on the table. And there's also an opportunity for you to inject yourself there.
Right.
Isn't this the truth?
100%.
100%. And I would love people to, one, get to that place where you can understand what I just said. But not just that, but when you're in that place of this vulnerable situation where you are, climbing the steps and you're dealing with your trauma and, you're making mistakes, dude, this is such a good time. And it's why I brought up the holiday lamas.
Yes.
Is because of a very similar point to what I'm making to you here.
Yes.
And again, going full circle into that. Is it making sense?
100%. Yeah, because it does align. I mean, that's absolutely the energy of that time, is that you're in that, you're recognizing the struggle.
Yeah.
You really are. And the struggle is everything. It's not the journey, it's the destination and everything. Yeah. People throw out that term, but they don't. Sometimes I think they throw it out, they don't really understand it.
Well, so I don't want to go too far away from the point that I was leading into, which is that, again, you've known me for many years,
Oh.
and we've had some really, not many, but very potent,
very deep
conversations.
Yeah.
To the point where, you know, me and you don't have that 2 hours to spend, but seems like we do.
Right.
When
It's so true.
Right?
It's so true, yeah.
Neither one of us have
No.
those 2 hours.
No, ever.
But you wind up in that conversation.
But it happens.
And you know what? You need that conversation.
Yes.
You know, when you're in the conversation, you're able to say, I really don't care about.
No, this needs
to. I need this kind of human interaction right now because it's going to feed my soul.
Correct.
And not only that, meeting somebody who's on a similar wavelength to you, especially. I mean, again, I'm so hesitant to say certain things because I don't want it to sound egotistical.
Right.
But the higher you get up the ladder of consciousness, the harder it becomes to run into somebody that makes sense to you and that you make sense to.
Yeah, it's like being in a foreign country and finally running into somebody in your own country.
Yeah.
And they speak the language. I remember this was a very unusual thing. When we went on our honeymoon to Ireland, we were. It was a group of people, you know, just from all over the world that were on this tour with us. And we ended up meeting, I ended up sitting across the table from this girl, and we just started talking. And I had something I had published online. And I don't know how it came up, but this girl that was sitting across from me at a table in Ireland had read it. And she goes, "Oh, you're that person who wrote that. I follow all of that." And she started naming everything that I had written. So in the middle of, on my honeymoon in Ireland, in this castle, I run into somebody who actually remembered something that I wrote 15 years ago.
That's synchronicity.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that the level of connection that I had with that person, because it was just somebody who knew something that I had done and written and talked about, so we were like talking on that level. So at that point, everybody else on the dinner table just went away and we were just connected like that, just going through that. And that's why when I run into you, I get that type of synchronicity going on. It's just like, I know that if I say something, you're going to follow it, or you are going to say something and I'm going to know exactly what you're talking about, because every time, you're going through an expansion, we're going through an expansion, they're like kind of moving together, and you're always reflecting a level that I'm either going through at that moment or I'm about to face or just have faced or something. It's always like a nice mirroring.
Yeah, one of the sentiments that I had there, which is that, like, you and I are not that far in age. I think maybe you're 10 years older than me.
Yeah, I think so.
Not again. Either way, it's not that big of a gap. But I remember the first conversation that I had with you, and I remember saying, "Man, if I would have had a mother like this," I remember saying that to myself, like later on in the evening.
Yeah.
And saying, if I would have had a mother like this, like what kind of person would I have? And again, I know that everything is perfect and it works, and you have what you have, and you get what you get because you need. I understand all of that, but it doesn't hurt once in a while to be like the what if, And I remember saying, man, like if someone had, and I don't mean to get really personal with you, and we can skip over this, but you don't have any children.
Well, not directly.
I'm saying
I didn't give birth. Yeah.
Yet you give off this, and I don't know if this is something that's too personal to say or not, but you give off this motherly vibe that's just drastic, overwhelmingly motherly kind of. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to say it, and I'm sure that it's something that
I do.
and it's interesting to me because I know several people who and it's a really hard thing to say. And again, I understand if it's too much of a thing to talk about, but some of the best, the most motherly, loving, giving people that I've met. Actually, I can think of 4 women right off the top of my head right now who I absolutely adore. You're one of them. No children.
Yeah, but I started teaching when I was like 14 years old. And it wasn't a conscious choice. I just didn't. I just happened to not meet like my perfect mate until shop was closed. It's like I was just too old at that point. It wasn't a conscious choice. But I really feel like I was put in a position where, I mean, I was teaching so many children and so many people, and reaching so many people that I kind of, that's where I got that, you know, that's where I flexed that muscle, you know. Like I was just, with the amount of children, I always say when I talk about people that I've trained, I say, oh, my kids, you know, I say that all the time. Oh, my kids, I have this one kid who, he became, you know, Navy SEAL or something. I have this kid who, you know, and I'm always talking about my kids. And they always come back and everything. That's actually the only reason I'm on social media, is to keep in touch with my kids.
The reason I'm the reason I'm asking this question, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is because I see a connection there. I see this synchronicity there, where, again, like I said, if I could think of 4 right away, who didn't birth their own children, yet have more motherly energy coming from them than most actual parents would. And I'm wondering, do you think that there's something to that, where, like, women, in particular women, I don't think I've ever met a man like that. No. I don't think I've ever met a man like that.
Not yet, but yeah, I don't think I have. Not yet.
I don't think I ever have come across that kind of person. But with women I have, and I guess my question to you was, and it was something that came up, and I'm sorry I'm asking it, but as I was formulating this interview, it was a question that came up in my head, and it was a reminiscent of the first conversation I had with you, where I was like, how come I didn't wind up with a person like this in my life? Why did I have to grow up without that? Which, again, had to happen that way, did happen that way. I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it didn't happen that way. But it led me to that question where I started connecting the dots. I'm like, oh, well, this person doesn't have kids, and this person, and this. And it's a really sensitive topic, and it's one that could be like, people might watch me say this and be like, this is an insensitive question.
Not at all.
Well, no, so I'm not saying you think that, but I'm saying that I see how someone would get to this place where this is an insensitive thing. But I'm wondering, do you think that there's certain women in the world that come here not just to be mothers to children, but to be mothers to the world to some degree?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, let's see, because I never had an urge. I never really felt, you know, I say that I didn't meet my husband until I was too old, but it was just kind of like the way the universe was just kind of affirming to me what I always felt. I kind of knew that I was never going to actually give birth. On some level, I could not see myself with children. And it wasn't that I didn't want them, that I didn't love them or anything like that. I just said, if I have a child, then I'm not going to be able to pay attention to all these other children. You know, and also, a lot of times when I talk about my business, I talk about it like it's a child as well, like that's
I've heard
my
you
child.
Say that.
Yeah, and you've heard me say that. I go, oh, I have 2 babies now. You know, I have 2 kids. One is an infant. You know, it's only about 8 months old, and the other one is 8 years old. Okay, you know, I have an 8-year-old and an 8-month-old. So, and that's the way I've always looked at it, because I think that there's so many levels of giving birth and having children and everything. I think that maybe I was just kind of sent here to help shake that perspective loose a little bit, you know, like you're going to feel a mothering energy off of me, but I am not your classic traditional definition of mother, so maybe you got to bend that a little bit now.
Yeah.
Because if you feel mother off of me, but I haven't given, you know, I am not a mother the way you think I should be a mother, maybe your definition of mother has to change. So maybe that's my job. Because I've always felt very motherly, and I had, even yesterday, I had this great experience where, you know, I'll go somewhere and these little kids, they'll just run up to me and just start talking, you know, and I went to the doctor just for a general, you know, just a general checkup or something, and there was a mother with 2 little kids with her in the waiting room, and they just started talking to me for no reason, and we just had this great conversation, and I'm talking to them and everything, and the little faces, and I can feel their energy like leaning in, and their mother had to pull them away. But I've always been like that with children. They're very much, and people are always very surprised that I don't have children, and I always look at them and I say, yes, I do. Yes, I do. You just don't think that I do, and maybe that's something that you can shift a little bit.
While we're as you were talking about this, I've got a flash flood of an image that not too long ago customers come in here all the time. I'm usually not that available or readily available as people might hope or think that I would be.
Yeah, me too.
and so, when I am here and I am actually readily available, let me tell you what, and I know you're going to agree to this, the people that you need to meet
come in.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's for me, the synchronicity behind that is just stunningly insane.
All the time.
Right? It's like, it just so happens that I have this free hour, and as this free hour is coming up, and it's not even a free hour.
Right.
It's just an hour where I can actually engage somebody with that kind of attention.
Right.
That person who needed that from me is the person who shows right? Up. So again, it's one of those things where when you're seeing these things happen, they're extremely real. But I wanted to bring up something to you. Maybe you can give me some perspective. So I don't know, a couple months ago, I'm up here, or I'm in my office or whatever it is, and there's a customer, they're downstairs, someone else is handling them, taking care of them, and I make my way downstairs, and they're at the process where they're checking out, they're getting checked out or whatever it is, and they have this little baby with them, and I came down, I would say like maybe a year and a half, 2-year-old kid, was walking. Oh, yeah. And I came down the stairs and I was like, hey, how are you guys? And the little kid got up, came over to me and held my hand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like, how weird and that's never happened. The only time that's ever happened to me, where a kid actually never met the kid, zero interaction, and the kid came up to me and she held my hand, and my first thoughts were whatever my first thoughts were there, which is, do you need help?
Right.
Are you reaching? Are you telling me that you need help? Okay, let's.
I know that's hard.
Yeah,
that's hard because that would have been the first thought in my head too. Like when they come up to me like that, because I used to have, I would have these moments where I'd come out into the waiting room when I had my karate school, and there's at that when it just got popular for more and more kids to sign up and everything, so you see all these families there, and most of the time I would just stay back in the office and everything because you're dealing with parents, and that's just that can be a little much. But every once in a while I'd come out, and whenever I did, there'd be maybe a little toddler in there, a little sister or brother of whoever's in the room and everything, and they'd come up to me, and there was always this one who just came up and she'd crawl up on my lap and she'd just hold on to me, and I would just sit there and I would just stroke her back, and this would go on, and her mother would just let her do it, and I always just felt like, oh my goodness,
that's very weird.
Yeah.
Because when the kid came over and held my hand, there was no reaction from the parents.
No reaction from the parents.
Now that you're saying that, that's very weird, because if my kid went over that's ending immediately.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
What for because of both sides of the spectrum.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't know.
Right. I don't know you.
Right.
And also at the same time, I'm sorry that this is intrusive to some degree, right? Which it never is. If a child is coming up to you and showing you love, that's only good news.
Of course, but you do have to teach the child personal space because not everybody is safe. All right, and that's really more to protect the child, not necessarily saying this is a bad person.
But like you were saying, no reaction.
Right, no reaction. And they would actually leave the kid. Sometimes they would just step away and, they would go out and get something, come back, and I'm still there with the kid 10 minutes later. And the child would fall asleep in my arms, and then they would put it in the stroller and leave. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that this happened, not with that same child, different kids. And I at one point, I was like, what is this child going through that needs this so much? But then I was seeing it from so many children. I started to realize, is this more for me or is this more for them? Maybe I need that. Maybe I need that moment with the child because I don't get it as much. I haven't had children, so I don't get that. I'm very blessed. I do have, a beautiful stepson who loves to cuddle, and I've known him since he was 2. So I'm very blessed. I do get it. I do get it now, but at that time I didn't. But I'm always wondering, what is that's happening in that moment? It's something I'm still facing.
Yeah, I was actually asking you.
I don't know. I'm going to flat out tell you, I don't know what it is, but I do know the one thing is I can read the kid. I don't read the rest of the situation, because if I try to read too much of it, it's almost like sometimes too much information. Ignorance is bliss to an extent. And all I know is in that moment, that kid, that child, is drawn to this moment, is drawn to my energy.
Also, like, not to, discredit myself here, but I'm also like not the person, I'm not the softest around the edges kind of person, you know what I mean?
But in that moment you were.
No, I think I am.
Yeah.
I think I am. And
I think you are, and I think that certain people can see it. I get that off of you. I get that off of you.
Well,
I feel like a very open heart whenever I've connected with you, and that's the only experience I've ever had. I don't think that you're abrasive. I mean, there's nothing that you've ever said to me that I've ever thought, I've never gotten that experience with you.
It's interesting,
and I think that children see truth.
Yeah.
So they are drawn. That child knew what, saw an open heart and was like, oh, there we go.
It's super interesting for me, and I'm sure you have a similar thing on your side of the fence where, there's people who leave reviews for me that I'm very rude and I'm obnoxious, and people who like really come after my neck.
Yeah.
And then there's also people who I meet who I become friendly with, and their first impression of me is that I am very standoffish, or that I'm very serious, or all of these, which I'm not at all those things, but. I think also, like we were saying, it's a mirror. What someone's giving off is kind of what winds up happening with a hypersensitive person.
Yes.
But one of the things that I think is extremely relevant is that, when you're in this place of this open space and you're exploring your space and you're trying to figure out things, it's just so refreshing to run into somebody else who's in that place where it's like, I don't care what anybody else is doing. I genuinely don't.
Right.
What you're doing. If I could disagree with you 1,000 perspectives.
Sure.
If someone's committing a crime, if someone's hurting somebody else,
as long as you're not harming.
But as far as narratives go and people's opinions and feelings and I could care so less about all of it.
Agreed.
And it's interesting when you're on the other side of it, where people tend to care about what you're doing and what you're saying, and to the degree that they're willing to take time out of their day to sling negativity at you. And I'm wondering, is that happening to you, and
yes.
how are you dealing with that?
Well, I've noticed that the closer I feel like I'm getting to something, the more that does happen. It's almost like you're shaking things loose. And again, I look at that as training. Okay, and this is why it was so good that you start out with martial arts, because for me, it always goes right back to that. That was my foundation. That's what I build everything off of. So when they're slinging stuff at me, I know that, like, when I get a bigger challenge, I must be getting good. Right? Not good in the terms of I must be getting closer to where I should be going at this time. So I know when that starts happening, then I'm onto something. I'm onto something, because there's more activity around where the energy's at, positive or negative. Okay, and we have a tendency, the negative always kind of hits first because it's going to get you ready and it's going to get you stronger. Then the positive can come, and then you feel now you've kind of reached the eye of the storm and everything feels good and it clears up. But when that starts happening, that's when you're really close. Okay, and that's why at this point, when people start saying stuff about you, or you start getting that negativity, you're obviously onto something, because you're shaking things loose for people. You're helping them to shed that negativity. That you better let go of this. You can say this, but you're gonna realize it's not true.
And I think the only way you can get there and do that is if you are content with who you are, and if you already know what your standards are, your morals, your ethics, your beliefs, and
the looks that I get sometimes. But I don't mind at all. I'm just like, you know what? You'll remember me.
But that's what I'm saying. what people who are judging the book by the cover are missing is the depth that comes.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you run into that person who's a little victimized, who's damaged, who's broken, and you immediately look at that person and, oh, this is prey, or whatever narrative. But what you don't understand.
Absolutely.
This is who we want to deal with.
Yeah.
This is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I used to, the funny thing is that I never realized how often I did this, but a lot of times when I had my karate school, sometimes I would just sit in the waiting room and just kind of hang out and look around a bit, just try to see it through somebody else's eyes. But then somebody would inadvertently come in, just see me sitting there in plain clothes, and they'd ask for the instructor all the time.
What color was your hair at that time?
It was darker. It was more like the under part.
Were you coloring it?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Even back when?
Then no, actually, it was kind of close to that color then. I've gone between light and dark, and I just kind of whatever I'm feeling at the time. Right now, I'm feeling a little loud, so my hair is loud. But at the time, no, it actually was red then.
So when you were teaching at school, you were still dyeing your hair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you practicing all of the things you're practicing now? Or were you back then? Were you more cultivating your business side of that?
Well, I think really more what it was is I was still feeling very much like a student of what I had been taught. Like I was trying to create my own little school, my own little world that was a little bit more hospitable than the school I had come from.
Yeah.
That's what I was really focused on. So I was starting, like you could see the beginnings of it with the hair. It's kind of like a trickle down. And then I started changing the way I dressed and everything, because at that time it was very much like athletic clothes because it was easy to switch back and forth. But I would see, like people would come in and they would see me and they would never assume that I was like this person that they were looking for, or they would see me and they go, I always thought you were much taller, or I always thought you were much older, or I always thought you were, like they never could jive with who I was. Even if I had like my uniform on, and there's one uniform that, it has the world champion patch on it, every once in a while you have to wear it. And I would have that on, and they would just be like, they would think it was like I borrowed it from somebody else. It was so funny that they just never, like they had this image of how I should look, and I never quite matched up to it. And at that time, it was also very unusual. Remember, there weren't a lot of women. So the women that were very hair pulled back, very tight, very severe, no makeup or anything on. And then I come in with my little curly hair, boom, boom, boom. I might have like, pulled back and everything, but I looked very different. Very, very, very different. And I would get very criticized for that.
Yeah.
Like you don't take yourself seriously because you feel like you have to wear makeup. I was like, no, I actually wear makeup because I enjoy putting it on. It's like putting on a necklace or I have fun with it. If I didn't, I wouldn't. There were years where I didn't wear makeup, didn't color my hair, didn't do anything. It was a different phase in my life. I was struggling with something different. Now, I like it, so I do it. If I didn't like it, wouldn't do it.
Well, it's your vibe.
Exactly, yeah.
Like if you came in just like dressed normal, it wouldn't be you.
No, there's really, fun in that.
It would be, I would be like, what?
You'd be disappointed.
I would be concerned.
Right? Yeah, there's like, what's wrong with her?
What happened to Melissa?
Well, every once in a while, somebody will see me in like sweats, and they'll be like, are you okay? It does happen every once in a while.
Yeah, I'd be concerned.
And I'll just be like, no, I just haven't gone to the dry cleaners or something. I ran out of clothes.
So going back probably around 5-6 years ago, I wind up, especially back then, I was dealing with like really crazy high-end people, billionaires, famous people. Yeah. It was very common that we'd have them in the warehouse, especially because we were really close to Manhattan.
Oh yeah.
And it was really interesting at that time, especially when I was younger. I was still in my mid-30s. Yeah. I was in my mid-30s, right. And I looked a lot younger even than I do now. Yeah. Hadn't been through cancer yet. Right. All of that, and I was an animal. I was a freaking animal, really like uncharted territory kind of animal, the way that I worked back then. And anyway, I had this guy who came in, and he was a billionaire, and he was in the garment industry, did all these crazy things, and he became really, really rich. Anyway, he came in with his girlfriend, and she was like a very, very famous designer. Oh, wow. Very, very upper echelon affluent people. Yeah. And I remember he came in, and he was like, wearing his like little boat shorts with his loafers with and his like button down with like what you kind of expect. And And I was like, here comes this. I was like, look at this asshole, look at this asshole, right? Because I grew up in New Jersey,
right. Oh,
and I grew up in the Bronx, and like I grew up in the. So I'm like, look at this asshole coming over, and he probably looked at me like, who's this little shit, right?
Of course,
who's this little shit? Because at the same time, he had a similar experience where I was just there in the warehouse. I keep myself busy. If I have 5 minutes, I'm going to do something productive.
Okay.
So I was down there. They came in, and I came over to him, and I started talking to him. And at that time, I was very confident because I had the business was
booming.
Woo-wee, right? So I was very confident from a success standpoint too at that time. Yeah. Not just from who I am as a person, but also like I'm also up here now, you know, which is what I've said in another podcast, is that monetary success really drove me in the wrong direction. That power and all that came with that drove me, which is why I think I got sick in the first place.
Right.
Anyway, I remember this interaction. Why I'm mentioning this is because this guy was a billionaire. I was a little shit New Jersey kid. And what wound up happening is I became such good friends with this guy. Right, so he invites me to his mansion, his like Illuminati mansion.
Oh, right? Illuminati mansion.
Actually, built by the Freemasons. Probably.
No, that's a perfect description of that's. I know exactly what you're talking about.
A literally hand carved mansion.
Yeah.
In one of the craziest houses I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, one of the things that he said was like the reason that I took, because it happened to me many times where people would take this liking to me because I think I was young.
Right.
I was more successful than people expected. I was not what people thought I was going to look like.
Yes.
I was not the kind of person people thought I was going to be. And again, all of those things. And anyway, one of the things that I remember him saying to me so much is the reason that I gave you the kind of time that I gave you, and one of the reasons that I liked you so much is because of the way you dressed.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and because these successful people, they come from a place where they have to wear a suit every day.
That's right.
They don't have a choice in the matter, and I get to dress. I got my chest hair hanging out, right? I mean, like I'm wearing Nike sweatshorts, and I've always been like that. You probably met me looking like this.
And
you
had a white sweatshirt on with black letters on it. I remember that. And you had a ball cap and everything. And you had the baggy shorts and everything, even though it was in the middle of like winter.
Yeah, I run hot.
Yeah.
And anyway, it wasn't just because of the way I dressed. It was because when he asked me why I dressed like everybody else that worked for me, I told him because I've afforded myself this. I get to do this.
You get to do this.
Why am I good? And like you said, I want to be comfortable.
I want to be comfortable.
I want to be me. I want to be comfortable. Exactly. I don't want to put on a facade. I don't want to put on an act. I don't want to like put on some fancy ass loafers and shit and pretend that I'm something that I'm not.
Yeah.
I just want to be me, and my success afforded me that.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where as you're moving through the process of your life and becoming who you can't forget who you are, where you're coming from, and why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. And last time you were here, we spoke, and I mentioned to you that there was a heaviness that I was feeling that was coming from the world. Not just me in my own personal life and my own personal circle, but I mentioned this heaviness that I've been feeling that's coming from the world, and I think you shared that sentiment.
I did.
Not just you, but there's several other people that I highly respect for their intuition that are also in this same plane, and I'm going to say that actually, it's interestingly enough, I feel like things are getting better.
I do too.
Although everyone's saying that they're going to get worse. Like even we talked about, what we talked about. I don't even want to repeat that on camera. No. But just because things look a particular way.
That's right.
Again, just like we're talking about this, doesn't mean. Just because things look like they're bad doesn't mean that they're going to be bad.
Exactly.
But anyway. We did share that sentiment about the heaviness. It's still there.
It is, but I feel that I can see like the light at the end more. Like I felt like I was deeper in, and I feel like we're coming out of it a little bit.
The 50-pound weight has become a 40-pound weight.
Correct. Yeah, it feels like when I last talked to you it was here, and now we're about here.
Yeah.
It's still deep, but it's definitely like I'm starting to feel.
Which is weird because things have progressed.
You'd think it was worse.
You would think it would be worse.
But I don't feel that way at all.
Why do you think that?
What I was going through, I personally, and I have a feeling whatever you were going through, whatever I was going through at that time, I'm at the point now where I see the reason for what I was going through. And it gave me more, like, and what I got from that, I'm much more well equipped to deal with what's coming, if that makes sense. Now, in general, for the world, I think it's the same thing for everybody. I think that everybody was kind of hitting a real low point, and maybe the consciousness is raising just a little bit. And I'm kind of feeling that because I'm having different interactions with people. I'm getting more of these synchronicities coming up. I feel like people are starting to, maybe there's certain things where perspectives are starting to shift just enough to where we're going to get a little bit different results.
A little wake-up call.
I agree, yeah.
Not in a bad way.
Not in a bad way at all. It's like, these things are going to happen regardless, but maybe it's going to take us in a better direction. And that's really what our life here is about, is that we're going to go through these things, but as long as they take you to this place, it's okay. It's okay. We can deal with this. We can deal with this. And that's the one thing, is maybe people are starting to take a little bit more responsibility. It could be just something like that. There's certain areas, but for me personally, I just feel like what I was going through then, now I see why. Okay, and you can't see it when you're going through it, because that defeats purpose. It's just that's the struggle.
The pressure.
Now I see why.
Are you talking about pressure?
Yes.
Okay. Exactly.
And that pressure has abated a little bit because I finally made the connections I needed to make by having that pressure applied.
Yeah.
So.
What also I was referring to, and just to make it clear, so I was talking about, there was like this heaviness in the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Right, and I feel like that has just kind of lightened up a little bit, which again, I know, and I would validate. But here's the thing. I've met, I'm going to say, over the course of my 20 years in business, and one kind of another, I'm going to say I've met people who consider themselves to be spiritual, witches, healers, psychics, mediums, clairvoyants, all this. I'm going to say that I've probably met over the last 20 years, if I'm being like really honest number, I'm going to say around 6,000-7,000.
Yeah.
Right? 6,000-7,000 of them. And every one of them has a flag that they like to wave.
Yeah.
One of the first things you'll hear out of someone is, I'm a witch, I'm a clairvoyant, I'm a psychic, I'm a medium, I'm a guru. Always the flag is going to be waved right away, which kind of tells you, okay, you already gave away your hand a little quick there, which again comes to that reading between the lines.
Right.
When someone is actually something, it's really not, like the tough guy never acts tough.
No.
The good person never says they're a good person.
A shaman never says they're a shaman.
Right. I mean, and it's one of those things where I really want to say, like, out of the 6,000-7,000 people that I've met that are in that spectrum, there's only been about 3 or 4 of those kinds of people that I met out of that spectrum where I was like, wow, this person is actually there. And the 3 or 4 people I'm referring, you're one of those people that I'm referring to, never brought up who they were, and none of it, nothing, zero, zilch, nothing. And it's interesting because as we're getting into this and I'm asking you, are you the Chakra Witch and what does this mean and stuff, all these things, we've never discussed any of this.
No.
We've never discussed any of your modalities. We've never discussed any of the things you're doing. Never, actually.
Because it's going to change anyway. It's going to change in here. As I learn more, it's going to change anyway. So that's why a lot of people, I'll use, the main reason I use the term witch is because I want to show you that what you think of as a witch is not necessarily. It's the only reason I use it. But a lot of times I sit there and I go, I don't know what the hell I do. I'm still trying to figure it out. It's just like, because basically all I try to do is, I was going to say, if I do anything, I listen. That's the only way I can really think of to classify, because I'm listening to downloads that I'm getting, and I'm given words. And that's all, like that whole self-mastery. I was given that, okay? The practical magician, I was given that. It wasn't something that I just sat there and said, oh, this sounds like what I do. I don't do that. I was actually given that. It was like a download. And I just sat there. I would be in the car and look at my husband. I said, I think we need to change a tagline on the website to the magic of self-mastery. And And he's like, oh, that's nice. Where'd you get that from? And I said, it's just something I downloaded. That was basically it. And all of these things, like any time you see it, if you go on the website and you hear it, probably all that terminology going to change.
I really want people to know that the lucrosity of your kind of perspective is something that we really need to, for me, is top. Your perspective and the way that you understand information and process information and data in such a practical way, and then are also open to whatever works for you, and then not trying to push that narrative on anybody else, not trying to say, hey, my way is the way. Right. That I've never heard that in any kind of way. You've never actually recommended to me personally, and we've had some really, really long, seriously, information exchanges that you tell to your mother. Right. Or like those kinds of, and you've never once in any conversation told me you need to do this, you need to believe this, you need to think or feel. And I do look at you on a superior level to my consciousness. Oh, goodness. I do genuinely look at you on a superior level. I think that you'd be a good source for advice for me. If I needed advice, I feel like you would be a good. I would love that. That would help me. If someone came to me and was like, "Hey, Chris, where would you source advice?" And I told someone, so a place I would source my advice from is actually the Chakra Witch, who right, which is the weirdest thing. Who is the high priestess at the X, Y, and Z. Right. Someone would be like, "What?" Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But the thing is that what someone might not understand is that just because you have a way of getting things done or a way that things make sense to you, and I'm not a witch. I'm not casting spells. Right. I'm not nothing. Yeah. Like I'm a dude who how is it that someone like you and someone like me would have such a You would never think. Never in a million years. But again, it just goes to show you so much, and I hope people get that from this conversation. I hope so too. And understand, like, my regard for you is top, top. Well, likewise. Top. Really, I was so honored to be asked. You have no idea what that meant to me, and I'm not trying to I didn't ask you about pumpkins. No, you didn't ask me about pumpkins or what I do or blah blah or magic potions. Yeah, you didn't ask me about any of the processes. Just like I never tell you what to do, you don't ask me to tell you what to do. See what I mean? So that's important too, because I get people coming to me all the time. Well, if I do this and this and this, will this happen? And I can never tell you that. Right? Then it's irrelevant how you get there, as long as you wind up there. And with that respect, I wanted to ask you, what do you think needs to happen in order for humanity to get on track? And do you think it's even possible at this point that we go in the opposite direction? Because there's two things on our table. One is destruction, which is where we just love running in that direction. Yes. But then there's also the real evolution of our species. There's an addiction to destruction. Because I think it's just, and the reason for the addiction is that they feel like they know what to expect. So there seems to be some semblance of control in the evil that you know. Like, at least with destruction, I'm talking about this, but I'm focused on this, at least I know this. But, uncharted territory is creation, which is the opposite. Okay, so I would say, honestly, it all goes back to stop looking at what's out there and go within. You've got to do your own work, really, because that's what makes all of that noise go away. Right. Yeah, so it's the key, as within, it's a tenet that I teach, as within, so without. So if you want everything else to clear up, and that's why I was saying that even though things are still, dark, I don't feel as dark. So I'm not experiencing as much dark, even though maybe other people are. Right. Okay? And maybe collective humanity, but I think if I do my part, and I continue to do my part, and you continue to do your part, we can be contagious. Right, and that's the point, is that instead of like putting our fingers this way, you gotta go there. We need to go here and ask ourselves, what are we doing to contribute? Oh yeah, well, as long as you do that, we're pointing back at you anyway. So it's like it comes back 2 times.
1, 2, 3.
Right.
Boom.
Again, I think it is really that simple.
It is.
And if every single person just took 5 minutes out of their life and just asked, okay, what's one thing that I can turn around and actually turn a negative into a positive? I think we solve this.
Like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the quantum leap we've been talking about.
Yeah. And it just requires just the smallest amount of effort from every one of us.
That's it.
I think that the problem is that what I would call the negative side is in your head telling you that it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's not going to make a difference.
Oh, it does.
You know, and the reason why you're being told that it doesn't make a difference is because it does.
It does.
Even if you don't achieve it tomorrow, or even if you didn't achieve it yesterday,
it's coming.
It still means a lot that you achieved it today.
Absolutely.
And that's the one thing I wish I could really relay to people is that, yeah, you're going to fall tomorrow, but you get up and then you succeed, and then you fall and then you fall, but you get up and you see. Those little successes go so far for all of us as a species, not just you as an individual.
No.
Rapid fire questions.
Sure.
What is your favorite book?
The Prophet Khalil Gibran.
What is that?
It's this beautiful, it's written like a poetry. It's a classic. It's the first one that popped into my head. I can't even say it's my favorite because I love so many, but it's basically about this prophet who just goes to this town and all the people come out and they ask him questions. And they say, tell us about marriage, tell us about this, and it's just written in beautiful verse. And he just goes into all these different subjects. He basically comes into just to answer the questions for everyone and then just leaves.
Is it an old book?
It's old.
Okay.
It's old. It's a classic.
When we say old, how about how old are we? We're talking like 1,000-year-old?
Oh no! It's
a couple 100 years old.
Yeah, not even.
Okay.
I'm just saying like it's not
something.
So it's
more
not
modern.
a buzz book or anything like that. But I know that we had some of the. The man who wrote it, you know, he was also an artist. He was a poet. He was an artist, and he just put all of that in there, and it's just basically it's almost like it's in verse. It's like listening to a song from beginning to end. And it just covers everything. So it covers family. You know, your children are not, they're of you, but you don't own them. There's just all these different tenets, and you're just reading it, and it's just put together so beautifully that you could tell it was just written in a complete just download of inspiration.
Well, you said it's written like a song. My second question was, what's your favorite song?
Ooh, I would say
replay for the rest of your life.
59th Street Bridge song by Simon and Garfunkel.
If you could only pray one prayer, what would it be?
Let me hear you.
Boom, dude.
Right?
That's what I'm talking
about.
Let
me hear you.
I need to know some shit.
That's it. Yeah, let me hear you.
Yeah. For me, the difference between a prayer and a spell is
action.
The thing is that a spell and a prayer should not be something that you say, give me.
No, you have to take action and responsibility.
Right, and so was a spell, no?
Yeah.
So what's the real difference between a spell and a prayer?
Well, see, I feel that what most people think of as a prayer is almost like begging. You know, please give me this. If I do this, please give me this. And unfortunately, I'm not. Please don't think that I'm saying this about everybody who prays, but in general, I think that's how we're taught. It's an immature way to have a relationship with the divine.
It's a one-sided relationship.
It's very one-sided because you're asking and you think you have to give something in order to get this something. So a spell is more like, this is what I believe that I need right now, and this is what I'm willing to do in order to make this happen.
Well, that's proper prayer.
Correct. So the only difference with a spell is that I'm going to do certain things.
Yeah.
Before to prep it, during it, and after.
What is your favorite trait found amongst humanity?
Humility.
What is your least favorite trait?
A lack of empathy.
One piece of advice you would give to others. If you only give out one piece of advice, period, someone just walks up to you random on the street right now and says, please give me, what's the best piece of advice you would give me?
Get to build a relationship with yourself so you can trust what's within. Because everybody, there's so many people out there who they feel that they hate themselves, or there's that lack of trust. That's the reason why they follow somebody else, is because they don't have the confidence in their own. So I would just say that get to the point where you can trust yourself, and build that, whether it comes through disciplining yourself so you know that when you say something you're going to follow through with it. You have to be able to trust yourself, because if you cannot trust yourself, there is no trust with anything else. So it has to start from within. So build that trust with yourself.
So would you say that then the piece of advice that you would give, because I'm going to be a stickler here, is learn to trust your intuition.
Correct.
Okay. What is one piece of advice you would give to yourself?
Trust yourself, because I question a lot. What I tend to do is when I get the download, sometimes I will get it and then I'll have to say, well, maybe you're not 100% on that. Maybe you need to get a little bit more information. And then I follow, and I go to a place I'm not, I go too far in that direction.
Yeah.
And then it ends up that I should not have gone that, I should not have put too much trust into this person or into this action, or I went too far in this direction. And I had all the information, but what happened was I was not in a place where I was quiet enough to get that really, just to really trust myself. It's like I let everything else leak in too much. I got too tired, whatever it was, and I didn't trust that information enough to put it above anything else, to put it above my brain, put it above what I think should be right or anything like that. I just, I don't always follow through. Like I get the information constantly, but what I don't always do is just stop right there. I think that I have to do more.
Me too.
That's it.
But that's fair.
We're
humans.
That's all right.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Love you.
Love you too.